Parents' favored sister ignored my achievements. They never said, "We're proud of you." Now they're watching another man proudly calls me his son. Original post. I, 29 male, grew up in a house where I was useful, but never loved. That might sound melodramatic to some, but it's the truth. I wasn't the kid who got hugs for scraped knees or gold stars on the fridge. I was the kid who got asked why the dishwasher wasn't unloaded yet. From the age of 10, I became less of a child, and more of a default housekeeper. I cooked dinner at least 3 times a week. I was folding laundry before I hit middle school. Scrubbing baseboards, mowing lawns, doing grocery runs. These were just assumed to be mine. No allowance. No thanks. No acknowledgement. Meanwhile, my younger sister Ellie, 26 female, lived in a different reality. She was their miracle baby, born after a long battle with infertility. I was the oops that happened 3 years before they were ready. Ellie never had chores. She never got in trouble. She got new clothes, expensive lessons, constant praise. I got sighs and side eyes. If Ellie cried, my mom dropped everything to comfort her. If I cried, my dad told me to man up. If Ellie failed a test, she was having a tough week. If I got anything less than an A, I was told I was throwing away my future. The rules were just different for us. By high school, the imbalance was painful. Ellie had a packed schedule, cheer, dance, weekend getaways with friends. I had responsibilities. Whenever I asked for something, a night off, a chance to hang with friends, even to join a robotics club, I was told, "That doesn't help the family." When I got accepted into a good engineering program out of state, I was so excited. It was a small school, but it felt like freedom. My dad shut it down instantly. He refused to co-sign the loan, said I needed to face reality, that if I wanted to go, I'd need to figure it out alone. So I did. I took out what loans I could. I worked 2 jobs, dishwashing at night and warehouse shifts on weekends. I survived on ramen, slept 4 hours a night, and still made the dean's list. They didn't come to my graduation. Didn't even send a card. I kept minimal contact for years. A birthday call here, a polite message there. But every time it circled back to Ellie. How proud they were of her. How she was really doing something with her life. How she needed help with her car payments, or was looking for a new apartment. Meanwhile, I was already working in tech. Already self-sufficient. Already done chasing their validation. Then, 5 years ago, everything changed. I met Greg. He was my boss's dad. We met at a company barbecue. I helped him set up chairs, and he struck up a conversation. He asked about my life, my family. I gave him short, guarded answers. But he listened. Over the next year, we became close. I'd help him fix things around his house. We played chess on Sundays. I started coming over for dinner. It was the first time in my life someone treated me like I wasn't a burden. Greg didn't try to replace anyone. He just showed up. Over and over, he was present, steady, encouraging. And slowly, he started calling me his son. It wasn't formal, it just evolved. First it was, "That's my boy, fixing things again." Then, "My son's coming over this weekend." Eventually it just became natural. He treated me like family without the guilt trips, the conditions, the weight. Last year at Thanksgiving, he raised his glass and said, "To family, blood or not." I didn't cry then. But I did later, in my car, sitting in the driveway. 2 months ago, I posted a photo of me and Greg at the garage. Captioned it, "Grateful for the man who taught me what being a father really means." That's when all hell broke loose. Missed calls, angry texts, accusations from people who hadn't spoken to me in over a year. I had finally found peace, and they couldn't stand it. Update 1. 1 week later. I didn't expect this post to blow up, but thank you. Truly. I spent the better part of 2 days reading every comment, every message. Some of them made me laugh, others made me cry. But the overwhelming support helped me stop second-guessing myself for the first time in a long time. So, here's what's happened since I posted. Yes, my parents saw it. I didn't tag them, didn't name names, but I guess someone sent it their way. Maybe a mutual on Facebook, maybe Ellie. I don't know, and at this point, I don't really care. My mom posted a status on Facebook the next day. It was vague, but not vague enough. Something like, some people turn their backs on the ones who raised them, but God sees it all. Kids these days forget who fed them, clothed them, sacrificed everything for them. It ended with a crying emoji and a Bible verse about honoring your parents. Then came the texts. First from Mom. You should be ashamed. Then from Dad. You've lost your way. That man isn't your family. Ellie went full social media. She posted a TikTok where she basically called me jealous and dramatic. Said I was trying to punish good parents just because they loved her too. She even used old pictures of us as kids, overlaid with sad music. Comments turned off, of course. She always did like controlling the narrative. I didn't respond. But it still got to me. What hurt wasn't the smear campaign. I expected that. What hurt was realizing how little they had to say that actually contradicted anything I wrote. They couldn't point to moments of love or support. They couldn't refute the facts. All they had was vague guilt and performative outrage. And then Greg found out. He saw the post. I didn't send it to him. He follows me online, so he saw it on his own. I was nervous. I thought maybe it was too much, that I dragged him into something he didn't sign up for. But when I came over that Sunday, he just gave me a long, firm hug. I wish you had told me sooner, he said. But I understand why you didn't. He told me I didn't have to protect him. That he was proud of me for speaking my truth. And then he said something I'll never forget. I always wanted a son who chose me. Not one who had to love me. You chose me. And that means the world. I barely held it together. I went to the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror, and just let it out. Years of holding things in, all breaking loose in a 5-minute cry I didn't know I needed. Later that evening over dinner, Greg and Sarah told me they were revising their will. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want anything from them, not money, not property, not responsibility. But they weren't offering it as an obligation. Sarah said, "You're not a guest in this family. You never were. We want to make sure you know that in every way that matters." Greg added, "You're our son. Period." I didn't argue. I didn't deflect. I just said thank you. And I meant it more than I've meant anything in my life. Since then, I've started to feel something I didn't realize was possible. Security. Not just financial or physical, but emotional. Knowing I have people who love me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I used to wonder if I was broken, because I never felt safe at home. Now I know I was never the problem. Thank you again to everyone who read, shared, or commented. You gave me the courage to keep going. More updates soon. For now, I'm just trying to breathe a little easier. Update 2. 2 months later. I wasn't going to post again. I thought I'd moved on. I'd gone no contact. I was building a life. I was healing. But toxic people don't like being ignored. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the middle of a client call, when our receptionist messaged me. She said there was an older couple in the lobby asking for me. They looked angry, but when she asked who they were, they softened and said, "We're his parents. We're here to make amends." I felt the blood drain from my face. I walked to the front quietly and saw them. My mom in a dramatic scarf, and my dad with a plastic sign in his hand that read in thick Sharpie, "We forgive you, come home." I asked security to remove them. Gently, kindly, but firmly. They protested. Loudly. Said they were there out of love. Said they just wanted 5 minutes. My dad tried to guilt the front desk staff. Told them they raised me, that they had every right to see their son. It was humiliating. And not for me, it was a performance. The kind they're good at. Public martyrdom. They eventually left. When I got home that night, there was a long email from Ellie. Subject line: "You'll regret this." She said I was ungrateful. Said our parents were doing the best they could. Said I was being cold. That I'd break their hearts if something happened, and I hadn't made peace. And then she said something that struck me. "You're going to regret this when they're gone." It was meant as a threat disguised as concern. But I didn't take it that way. I sat with that sentence for a while. Turned it over in my head. And I realized something. I won't regret it. I'm not the one who broke anything. I was a kid who asked to be seen. Who asked to be treated with love. They were the ones who turned that down. Over and over. I didn't cut ties out of cruelty. I cut ties to stop the bleeding. And Greg? He's been my rock through all of it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell me how to feel. He just showed up with takeout and said, "You okay?" He told me something that stuck. You don't owe anyone a front row seat to your healing just because they claim they bought the ticket. I've never felt more empowered. I didn't respond to Ellie's email. I didn't respond to the 10 follow-ups she sent after that. I let the silence speak for me. A few days ago, Greg and I were at a local coffee shop when a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years spotted us. She came over, looked awkward, and asked if I'd be coming home for Christmas. I smiled and said, "I am home." Ellie went full social media. She posted a TikTok where she basically called me jealous and dramatic. Said I was trying to punish good parents just because they loved her too. She even used old pictures of us as kids, overlaid with sad music. Comments turned off, of course. She always did like controlling the narrative. I didn't respond. But it still got to me. What hurt wasn't the smear campaign. I expected that. What hurt was realizing how little they had to say that actually contradicted anything I wrote. They couldn't point to moments of love or support. They couldn't refute the facts. All they had was vague guilt and performative outrage. And then Greg found out. He saw the post. I didn't send it to him. He follows me online, so he saw it on his own. I was nervous. I thought maybe it was too much, that I dragged him into something he didn't sign up for. But when I came over that Sunday, he just gave me a long, firm hug. "I wish you had told me sooner," he said. "But I understand why you didn't." He told me I didn't have to protect him. That he was proud of me for speaking my truth. And then he said something I'll never forget. "I always wanted a son who chose me. Not one who had to love me. You chose me. And that means the world." I barely held it together. I went to the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror, and just let it out. Years of holding things in, all breaking loose in a 5-minute cry I didn't know I needed. Later that evening over dinner, Greg and Sarah told me they were revising their will. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want anything from them. Not money, not property, not responsibility. But they weren't offering it as an obligation. Sarah said, "You're not a guest in this family. You never were. We want to make sure you know that in every way that matters." Greg added, "You're our son. Period." I didn't argue. I didn't deflect. I just said thank you. And I meant it more than I've meant anything in my life. Since then, I've started to feel something I didn't realize was possible. Security. Not just financial or physical, but emotional. Knowing I have people who love me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I used to wonder if I was broken, because I never felt safe at home. Now I know I was never the problem. Thank you again to everyone who read, shared, or commented. You gave me the courage to keep going. More updates soon. For now, I'm just trying to breathe a little easier. Update 2. 2 months later. I wasn't going to post again. I thought I'd moved on. I'd gone no contact. I was building a life. I was healing. But toxic people don't like being ignored. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the middle of a client call, when our receptionist messaged me. She said there was an older couple in the lobby asking for me. They looked angry, but when she asked who they were, they softened and said, "We're his parents. We're here to make amends." I felt the blood drain from my face. I walked to the front quietly and saw them. My mom in a dramatic scarf, and my dad with a plastic sign in his hand that read in thick Sharpie, "We forgive you, come home." I asked security to remove them. Gently, kindly, but firmly. They protested. Loudly. Said they were there out of love. Said they just wanted 5 minutes. My dad tried to guilt the front desk staff. Told them they raised me, that they had every right to see their son. It was humiliating. And not for me, it was a performance. The kind they're good at. Public martyrdom. They eventually left. When I got home that night, there was a long email from Ellie. Subject line: "You'll regret this." She said I was ungrateful. Said our parents were doing the best they could. Said I was being cold. That I'd break their hearts if something happened, and I hadn't made peace. And then she said something that struck me. "You're going to regret this when they're gone." It was meant as a threat disguised as concern. But I didn't take it that way. I sat with that sentence for a while. Turned it over in my head. And I realized something. I won't regret it. I'm not the one who broke anything. I was a kid who asked to be seen, who asked to be treated with love. They were the ones who turned that down. Over and over. I didn't cut ties out of cruelty. I cut ties to stop the bleeding. And Greg? He's been my rock through all of it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell me how to feel. He just showed up with takeout and said, "You okay?" He told me something that stuck. You don't owe anyone a front row seat to your healing just because they claim they bought the ticket. I've never felt more empowered. I didn't respond to Ellie's email. I didn't respond to the 10 follow-ups she sent after that. I let the silence speak for me. A few days ago, Greg and I were at a local coffee shop when a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years spotted us. She came over, looked awkward, and asked if I'd be coming home for Christmas. I smiled and said, "I am home." She didn't say anything after that. And you know what? That silence felt good too. I don't regret any of it. Not letting Greg into my life. Not walking away from people who only loved me when I was useful. Not choosing peace over performative guilt. This is my family now. And I'm exactly where I belong. Update 3, 3 months later. They're still trying. Not as aggressively now, but in that exhausting, low-energy way toxic people do when they realize you're not coming back. Passive-aggressive Facebook posts. Vague Instagram stories. Ellie posted old pictures of us as kids with captions like, "When he still cared." Relatives I barely talked to have started messaging me. Some with concern, some with guilt, some with veiled threats disguised as family wisdom. Your parents are heartbroken. Don't let pride ruin your family. You're being too harsh. Funny how none of those people messaged me when I was 19 and sleeping on a futon, juggling warehouse work and night classes, surviving on ramen while Ellie got monthly allowances. Funny how none of them ever asked what it felt like to parent yourself before you hit puberty. Greg, as always, keeps me grounded. He doesn't jump in to fix it. He just listens. Offers advice when I ask for it. And sometimes drops wisdom that hits me like a ton of bricks. People who never respect your boundaries will always call it betrayal when you finally enforce them. I've written that quote down. It's in my fridge. And it's true. It's painfully, beautifully true. My parents aren't trying to reconnect because they miss me. They miss control. They miss their scapegoat. They miss the person who would drop everything to fix their messes, smooth over their drama, absorb their dysfunction like a human sponge. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm just free. I walk differently now. I sleep better. I smile without wondering if I've done enough to deserve it. The more they try to reach in from the past, the more I realize how far I've come. Ellie tried again last week. Send me a screenshot of one of Greg's Facebook posts. Something innocent and heartwarming about teaching me to fix a broken fence. Her message just said, "This is embarrassing." I didn't reply. Because it's not embarrassing. What's embarrassing is being almost 30 and still trying to gatekeep someone else's peace. What's embarrassing is being so threatened by someone's happiness that you have to tear it down publicly. Greg told me later that he saw the comment section on that post. He said he was ready to remove it if I wanted. I told him no. Let it stay. Because I'm proud of that moment. Proud of the fence we fixed. Proud of the man I've become with Greg's help. Proud of the quiet, solid life I've built away from the chaos. And I'm done hiding it. Update 4. 4 months later. Last week, Greg and Sarah held a family gathering for their anniversary. It wasn't just a casual dinner. It was a real event. String lights across the yard, live acoustic music, 2 food trucks. Sarah insisted on a taco bar and Greg got his favorite barbecue. And over 40 people in attendance. It was warm, loud, and full of the kind of joy I never grew up with. It felt like something out of a life I used to think belonged to other people. Around 7 p.m., Greg clinked his glass and announced to everyone that he wanted me to say a few words. I froze for a second. Public speaking still rattles me. But then I looked at him, his smile, the quiet nod of encouragement, and I felt steady. I took a breath and stood up. I said, "Family isn't DNA. It's not guilt. It's not an obligation. Family is showing up when it's hard. Loving without terms. Believing in someone who was never told they were worth it. Thank you for being my family." Silence. Then applause. Then hugs. Sarah kissed my cheek. Greg squeezed my shoulder. And for a moment, I just stood there, soaking it all in. That was the first time in my life that I felt completely, fully included. Not tolerated, not useful, just wanted. Later that night, someone pulled me aside. One of Greg's nephews, I think. He said, "I didn't know your story, man. But I'm glad you're here. It wouldn't have felt right without you." That simple statement nearly broke me again. I left that night with my arms full of leftovers, and my chest full of something I didn't recognize right away. But I know now, it was peaceful. The next morning, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I didn't need one. I'd know that handwriting anywhere. All caps. Sharp strokes. Black ink that always seemed angry even when it was meant to be loving. Inside was a single line. "You made your choice. Hope you're happy." No signature. No attempt at warmth. Just a cold, bitter epitaph for a relationship that had long since rotted. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I laughed. Because yes, I did make my choice. And yes, I am happy. Happier than I've ever been. Greg and Sarah came over that weekend. We watched football and ate leftover brisket. Greg gave me a key to their house, just casually slid it across the counter and said, "In case you ever need it," and we're out. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't ceremonial. But to me it meant more than any blood tie ever could. I've stopped checking my old family's pages. I've stopped listening to the flying monkeys who still send the occasional guilt text. I've stopped waiting for an apology that will never come. Because I don't need closure from the people who broke me. Final edit. 6 months later. A lot has changed. Greg and I took a road trip last month, just the two of us. He showed me where he grew up, his old school, the shop where he learned to weld. We stopped at tiny diners, listened to old rock music on the highway, and talked about everything. And I mean everything. No pretending, no judgment. Just two men having the kind of conversations I used to envy on TV. He told me stories from his youth that made me laugh, cry, and think. About his regrets, his first love, the time he nearly quit everything after losing his father. Then, while watching the sunset over a cornfield in Iowa, he said something I'll never forget. "If I'd had a son, I would have wanted him to turn out like you. No question." I couldn't speak for a full minute. I just nodded and blinked hard. Because sometimes silence says more than words. When we got home, Sarah had framed a photo of the two of us from the trip. We're standing next to a rusted old water tower, wind in our hair. Both smiling with that easy kind of peace that only comes when you stop running from the past. Meanwhile, from the toxic side of my old life, I've started hearing things. My parents apparently are in damage control mode. They've stopped being as public with their jabs. My dad told someone at a church gathering that, not all wounds heal in time, especially when the child refuses to pick up the phone. My mom, I'm told, still tells anyone who'll listen that I was easily led astray. The thing is, they haven't changed. Not even a little. I used to think they might. That maybe, just maybe, if I distanced myself, they'd reflect. Feel the absence. Realize what they did. That they'd reach out with a real apology. But no. They didn't grow. They just shifted tactics. Played victim louder. Got quieter in their cruelty. More sophisticated in their manipulation. It doesn't work on me anymore. Ellie did try one last Hail Mary. A long rambling email. 8 paragraphs of forgiveness, revisionist history, and veiled guilt. She said she wanted us to be together for Christmas. Said, like old times, twice. Said, our parents miss you 3 times. I didn't reply. I didn't even get angry. Because here's the thing about people who confuse obligation with love. The only way to win is to stop playing. I spent the holidays with Greg and Sarah. They gave me socks, a new set of tools, homemade cookies. I gave them a framed photo of the 3 of us from Thanksgiving. We sat by the fire, watched old movies, and made hot chocolate. Not once did I have to earn my seat at the table. That's what love feels like. I've stopped checking my family's social media. I've muted the relatives who still think blood is everything. I've stopped explaining myself to people who were never interested in hearing the truth. Some days I look back and feel a strange mix of sadness and pride. Sadness for the kid I was, who kept trying to be good enough. Pride for the man I became, who realized he didn't have to be. I'm not healed, but I am healing. And if you're reading this, and you've been made to feel like love is a transaction, let me say this clearly. You don't owe your parents access to your life just because they share your DNA. You owe yourself safety. You owe yourself peace. You owe yourself the right to walk away. Choose peace. Choose healing. Choose your own damn table, then fill it with people who actually want you there. That's what I did. And I've never looked back. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Sister mocked me for years while parents watched. Then they skipped my wedding to protect her ego. I stayed silent, and it cost them everything. I, a 28-year-old female, married 8 months ago after being in a relationship for 4 years. Everyone attended the wedding except my parents and my sister, 26F. I was not shocked that my sister did not attend, because she and I had never gotten along well. I issued an offer to her out of politeness and common civility, but my parents' absence was unexpected. It's no secret that my parents have always preferred my sister to me. She has always been better at almost everything. She is obviously more conventionally attractive than me because I am small and overweight, and she is supermodel material. I am not even exaggerating. If I'm not mistaken, she dabbled in modeling while in college and was part of certain assignments, but she became too preoccupied with her studies and quit. She has a business degree, and shortly after graduating from college, she accepted a job offer from a large corporation and began rapidly climbing the corporate ladder. She's young, attractive, and accomplished, and my parents have always been prouder of her than of me. To be honest, I do not blame them for this. She is the girl they can truly brag about. In comparison, I am quite ordinary. I don't refute it because I lack both attractiveness and intelligence. I'm not disparaging myself, I'm simply being practical because, while I'm not as accomplished as she is, I'm still content with my life. It used to sting that my parents weren't as proud of me as they were of her, and they didn't make any attempt to show me the same love and affection. With time, I simply accepted it. It wasn't like I had a choice. I had tried everything I could to get my parents to treat me the same way since I was a child, but nothing seemed to work. It seemed as if they were infatuated with my sister, and I would never be good enough. So why bother attempting to impress individuals who will never recognize your positive qualities, and will only compare you to your sister? After a while, I just quit trying. I started living my own life, and I must admit that it made my life a lot happier. I still kept in touch with my parents though, because I didn't want to cause any problems. I knew they were very concerned with keeping up appearances, so if I abruptly stopped talking to them and cut them out of my life, they would make a big deal out of it, and I didn't think the drama would be worth it. So I opted to be there on the surface, but I was actually rather far from them, and they didn't seem to mind since they had my sister to obsess over. That was how it had been for the past few years, until last year, when I got engaged to my longtime partner. Of course, I informed my folks about it. I invited them, but they did not turn up. It wasn't like I missed them much during the wedding, but it was still a bit of a surprise because they didn't have a large crowd. People asked about my parents. Nobody was surprised that my sister did not show up because they knew we had a strained relationship. However, my parents' absence was significant, especially because there was no explanation provided. So, a few days after the wedding, I decided to approach them about it. Even before the wedding, when I realized they had not RSVP'd, I attempted to contact them but received no response. Back then, I suspected something was odd, but I wasn't too concerned because I already had a lot on my plate. However, after the wedding, I desperately needed answers. I am determined to confront my parents once and for all. When I phoned them after everything was done, they finally answered. Even though I had assumed they would simply ignore me in the weeks leading up to the wedding. As soon as they answered the phone, they told me that they were extremely disappointed that they would be unable to attend, and that I should have sent them a formal invitation. I was visibly perplexed, because I was certain that I had invited them. My husband and I had carefully reviewed the guest list several times, to ensure that no one had been left out. We sent out both physical and electronic invitations, and I knew my parents had received one. So, When they indicated they were furious that I hadn't even bothered to send them an invitation during the phone call, I realized something was wrong. While they were telling me how insulted they felt since they hadn't received an invitation, I decided to go check to see if I had sent it. And sure enough, I had. So I knew they were trying to gaslight me, but I didn't say anything. I simply apologized for my mistake and hung up. I was obviously annoyed that they were attempting to make me believe that this was my fault in some way, despite the fact that they had chosen to skip my wedding on purpose for reasons I had no idea about. After that phone call, I informed my husband what had transpired and how my parents had attempted to gaslight me, and he said he was very confident they were just furious that I was marrying before my sister. So that's why they opted to skip the wedding, and now they're trying to dupe me into thinking I had somehow forgotten to invite them, so they can have an explanation without having to admit their mistake. My husband made me realize that they were only concerned because I was marrying before my sister. At first, I didn't comprehend what he was saying, but then he brought up other examples. First, when I called my parents to tell them I was engaged, they were not pleased at all. They appeared astonished, but I imagined they were surprised that I was calling to inform them at all. Because we had a rather frosty relationship, I only called them before posting about it on social media, because I felt it was my obligation as a daughter, and it would be more polite to do it. So I assumed that was what they were surprised about, that I was informing them. But my husband informed me that he could tell they weren't thrilled, because the look on their faces wasn't one of surprise. He didn't mention it to me at the time since he didn't want to make a big deal out of it or stress me up. But even during the engagement party he noticed that my parents were sitting in a corner pouting, rather than chatting with everyone. And when he went to speak with them just to be courteous, he discovered that they were on the phone with my sister, and he could hear her crying on the other end while they tried to console her. It didn't take a genius to figure out why they weren't too pleased with my entire engagement scenario, and even though he couldn't hear what my sister was saying on the other line, he could make an educated guess. When my parents realized he was approaching, they set down their phones and began acting silly with him. But it was too late. I was startled to learn these facts, but they helped me explain a number of other things. The only reason he hadn't told me anything was that he didn't want to make me nervous about the wedding, which I was already stressed about preparing. It wasn't until after the wedding that I learned about it, and I'm very sure that was the real reason they didn't attend. It couldn't have been conceivable that they didn't receive the invitation, especially because I double-checked everything. So after they didn't show up for my wedding, I determined I wasn't going to speak to them anymore, not even for the sake of appearance. I'd had enough, and if my sister was their sole priority, they could stay with it. A couple of weeks ago, I learned from some of my family that my sister is engaged. Apparently, she's been with this guy for a year, and when he proposed, she accepted. Good for her. And I know my parents are overspending on this wedding since they have been talking about it online. They've already spoken with a few of their pals and started looking into large venues, which will be quite expensive. My sister has been informing our relatives that she will be shopping at Vera Wang, and I know it will be a big deal. I didn't give it much thought, but a couple of days ago, my parents contacted me and informed me that it was extremely inappropriate for me to try to disrupt my sister's wedding. I had no idea what they were talking about, so I assured them I hadn't mentioned anything. Neither did I care because we hadn't spoken in a long time, and I wasn't interested in fighting with them right now. But they told me that they knew I had spent the previous 8 months after my wedding talking trash about my family, and they were very disappointed in me. They informed me that all of the relatives they had communicated with so far had expressed no interest in attending the engagement party, and had already begun to make reasons for not attending the wedding. They knew I was involved since my sister was evidently furious that our family would not attend her engagement celebration. She had decided to vent to a cousin of ours, and she had been told that apparently, I had been telling everyone in the family that my parents had not shown up at the wedding because they were upset that my sister was not marrying before me, as they would have preferred, because they think she is prettier and more successful. They accused me of painting them in a negative light, and as a result of my claims our family was unwilling to attend the engagement party, let alone the wedding. And there, they had a point, because after the wedding, if my relatives asked me why my parents hadn't shown there, I would simply tell them what I thought. I was really outraged at my parents' actions, and after hearing what my husband had said, I didn't think I needed to hold back. Anyway, whenever I ran into a relative or was attending a family gathering, and they asked whether I finally had an answer as to why my parents were not present at my wedding, I would just tell them the truth. I didn't think I was gossiping about them, or doing anything improper because, in my judgment, they couldn't be bothered to keep up appearances during my wedding, despite the fact that they had always been quite concerned about doing so. Because they prioritized protecting my sister's feelings above all else. So, I'd learnt my lesson. I wasn't going to put in any effort, and after my husband told me, I decided that being honest was the way to go. I didn't truly consider the repercussions at the moment. I thought people deserved to know why they weren't at the wedding. I told them what my husband told me. I also told them about my talk with my parents, which I described as informal. I didn't try to sound sympathetic, but I also didn't mince things. What I didn't understand was that word spread, and by now, almost everyone in the family knows that my parents first skipped my wedding because they didn't want my sister to feel terrible about their attending, and also because she was more important to them. On top of that, they attempted to deceive me into believing that I had somehow missed inviting them. Even though they didn't say anything to me directly, my family has decided not to attend my sister's wedding. They do not want anything to do with my parents. And the cousin who told my sister about all of this had overheard her discussing it for quite some time. This girl is a gossip, so I'm not surprised she opted to share that information with my sister and parents. I'm quite sure she just wants to see the drama unfold. And she's in luck since my folks are quite unhappy. They believe that I sabotaged them on purpose. They believe that I am the one who is jealous of my sister, which is why I intentionally spread these rumors and made them appear like the bad ones. They said my husband made up the entire affair. Nothing of the sort had occurred. They even accused me of not inviting them on purpose so that I could use the excuse to seek compassion from relatives and portray them as villains. I do not agree with any of that. I'm very sure my spouse was speaking the truth, and I know I sent those invitations to them. What I do find strange is that, because of what I told my relatives, they have decided not to attend my sister's wedding. So, Aita for informing my entire family about the real reason my parents did not attend my wedding. Edit. There are various reasons why I don't get along with my sister and never have. The main one is that she's constantly trying to bring me down. It's not enough for her that our parents already prefer her over me. She wants me to be aware of this at all times. I have no idea what her problem is, but she has always attempted to rub it in my face since we were children. It's not like I didn't realize she was a lot more successful than me when we were kids. She was constantly at the top of her class, excelled in sports and other activities, and was also quite popular. That should have been sufficient for her. But for some reason, she made it a point to make me feel horrible about it by making nasty remarks, comments and the like. She had a group of friends who, despite the fact that I was their senior, tried to bully me every day. The only reason I never made a big issue about it was that I didn't believe they were important enough for me to address. At worst, they were a small inconvenience to me. I found them annoying, but I didn't really care about them. As for my sister, I had hoped that she would eventually grow out of this dumb little habit. But she didn't. She continued to behave in the same manner, making jokes about me, making digs at me, and so on, far into her adulthood. To the point that I simply stopped showing up at places because of her. I do not want to make any drama. I'm typically a non-confrontational person who dislikes interacting with folks I don't like. I basically try to avoid them altogether. So, over the past few years, I've only attended family occasions when absolutely required. However, when it comes to minor issues, I tend to avoid them simply because I do not want to see my sister. So that's why I don't get along with her. And I don't regret it. I tried so hard to get along with her when we were youngsters. However, you eventually realize that this is not the type of person you want in your life. That's the kind of revelation I had with my sister a few years ago. Then again with my parents recently. The only reason I'd held on to these ties for so long, despite the agony they'd given me so far, was that they were all I had as family. I mean, I had my relatives, but it wasn't the same. However, I now believe that my relatives are probably more like my family than these people ever were. Update 1. Hey, after reading the comments here, I decided to ignore my parents, since I realized that exposing the truth to the rest of my family was not as horrible as they made it out to be. I simply stated my point of view. I do not need to apologize for it. So, when they started messaging me constantly, I decided to respond and say the same thing to them. Then they started arguing with me, telling me that I had done everything on purpose. That I wanted to damage their image for the rest of the family just because I had always been envious of my sister. We were talking over the phone, and before I picked up, I had already determined that this time, I was going to let it all out. Because I needed to vent. As soon as they accused me of being envious of my sister, I simply agreed. I told them that yes, I was jealous of her, but not for the reasons they imagined. I wasn't envious of her because she was more accomplished or more conventionally gorgeous. I had always been envious of her since, rather than being neutral, the two of them had always preferred her to me. I could understand the rest of the world selecting her over me for the reasons I indicated. But what about my own parents? That really hurt. And I was tired of pretending I didn't care. Because things like this reach people. And the idea that this shouldn't bother me, that I should just brush it aside and act that everything is fine, is also extremely unrealistic. But I did it because I anticipated my parents to eventually appreciate me for who I am. But that never occurred. Even when I wasn't trying, I was unconsciously attempting to make them appreciate me. That's why I'd stayed quiet about their horrific treatment of me for so many years. However, when I eventually spoke up, they objected because it made them seem bad. Okay, rough. Because if they truly believe that the truth makes them appear terrible, they may be the source of the problem, not me. If they wanted to appear as excellent parents, perhaps they should have just been decent parents. And I'd only have positive things to say about them. But they had given me this ammunition themselves. So they have no reason to complain about me, making them seem terrible. If I wanted to tell my relatives how my parents treated me, how they always preferred my sister over me, and make a big issue about it, I would do so. They had already accused me of playing the victim to gain sympathy. So, maybe I was doing just that. Instead of calling me repeatedly to persuade me to go back on my word, perhaps they should try talking to my relatives and convincing them that they are not the individuals I made them out to be. Perhaps it would be a more effective use of their time. But talking to me would get them nowhere, because I'd already said everything I needed to say. And if my relatives trust me, that's great. The basic line was that I wasn't going to make things better for them. I am not responsible for anyone else's reputation other than myself. My parents simply went silent, most likely because they were unfamiliar with my behavior. They had not expected an explosion like this from me, because I had previously stated that I am a non-confrontational person who is also quiet and introverted. They undoubtedly assumed I was going to let this go as well, but I was tired of having them walk all over me in the hopes that they would eventually appreciate me. But after a few seconds, my parents told me that because I had already determined that they were bad parents, and I had such strong feelings about their inability to raise me in the same way that they had raised my sister, they had decided that it might be time to let go. So far, they had expected me to resolve the matter because they felt I was family. They assumed I was their daughter, so I'd be concerned. But obviously I was glad they were hurting. So they assured me they had no expectations of me, and that I could live my life whatever I chose. They would never trouble me again. They concluded their little address by reminding me that, at the end of the day, we were both their daughters. Perhaps I just felt like they had always chosen my sister over me because I was the insecure one. But it wasn't their fault, and I shouldn't blame them. So, in the end, they couldn't admit that some of this was their fault. They expected me to be the evil guy. It took a lot of work for me to keep my mouth shut, but I eventually didn't say anything since I knew disputing with them would be fruitless, and I didn't want to end up talking in circles. So if they wanted to make me the villain, that was great with me. At the very least, it would get them off of my back. But now that I've made my point and told them how I've felt throughout the years, I feel a lot lighter and healthier. Whatever happens with my sister's wedding, they can handle it. I honestly don't care. That's their problem to solve. I am simply going to do my thing. Update 2. Hey. I had that talk with my parents a few days ago, and today my sister contacted me and texted me that anything I said to my parents was completely wrong, and they were quite furious about it. After all, they reared me. They had done everything for me as parents, and now I couldn't simply turn around and tell them that they hadn't done enough, because that would be extremely ungrateful of me. She was playing all holier than thou, and I knew she was just enjoying the opportunity to lord it over me, pretending to be the epitome of elegance and dignity when she was far from it. It greatly irritated me, so I didn't respond to the text. I just blocked her. I believed that would be enough. But then a few hours later, my husband called to tell me he had received a text from an unknown number. And sure enough, it was my sister texting him. She had basically told him the same thing, and then told him that he needed to get me to apologize to our parents since what I was doing was extremely wrong. And now that he's a member of the family, he can't just sit back and watch things like this happen. Especially when it makes me look like a complete fool. I was outraged that she had the arrogance to text my husband. But my husband found it quite amusing. He thought it was hilarious that my family thought emailing him and asking him to make me apologize would work. And because of him, I was able to laugh about it and brush it off. Otherwise, I might have gone overboard. I haven't told anyone about what's been going on with my parents in the last few days because I haven't had time to chat with most people due to my job schedule. But then, if someone asks me or I run into somebody, I'm going to be really upfront with them, because I'm sure that's what my parents will be most furious about. I'm not typically like gossip, but if it's making my folks upset, I'm all for it. And the greatest part? It's not even gossip. I'm just telling them my side of the story. I don't even need to make anything up. I just have to tell them how they really behave, and it's terrible enough that people despise them. The funniest part of all of this is that, despite the fact that they already know I'm not going to hold back any longer, nor will I protect the family's reputation by being silent, they're still going out of their way to make things worse for themselves by pulling these antics. Update 3. Hello. So it's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and my parents have begun to inform everyone in the family that I've been spreading false rumors about them in order to make them look bad. All because I was jealous of my sister, and couldn't bear the thought of people attending her wedding, which was going to be much grander and more extravagant than mine. I was quite sure they thought this technique would work, making me look like the evil guy and all. However, the majority of our family members had already decided to support me. And, to be honest, I don't need to try. They suspected my parents of overindulging my sister when we were children. So my account of events was far more credible to them than whatever my parents were trying to persuade them to believe. Instead of simply taking their word for it, they informed me what my parents were saying about me behind my back. In fact, their entire scheme flopped. Because now people are laughing at them and their idiocy alongside me. This is the epitome of karma, and I'm so delighted they chose to expose everyone to their true colors. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Cheated on my wife, now she's gone and pregnant with another man's baby. How can I get her back? I know, I'm aware of my faults, I know I screwed up. She and I had something beautiful. She is still the love of my life, we were together for 10 years, 2 dating and 8 married. But I made a huge mistake and cheated on her. It was just once, just one damn time. Somehow she found out, I never knew how because I haven't been able to talk to her since then. I guess she found something on my phone. I came home that afternoon as usual and everything felt weird, the house felt emptier. I quickly realized that her things were gone. I panicked, I started calling her over and over, but her phone didn't even ring. Suddenly I saw some papers on the table, she was divorcing me. Under the divorce papers, there was a note that said, "This is what you do with cheaters." That was the last thing I got from her, 2 years ago now. Of course I called the contact information for her lawyer, who has been the only bridge between us. But he just told me that he was her legal representative and that she didn't want to see me. I fought, I got angry, but in the end her lawyer just told me that it would be better if I got my own lawyer. I didn't want to. I absolutely refused to accept that 10 years of relationship would end like this. I know I have failed, but I always wanted to fix it. I know that if she gave me the chance, I could make that sweet and special girl I met more than 10 years ago fall in love with me again. I know that I can make her forgive me. After all, many couples go through similar things and get over it. Why can't we be one more couple in that statistic? Why after 8 years of marriage am I thrown away like garbage for a mistake? I don't deserve so much indifference. I haven't been able to see her or even hear her voice in 2 years. 2 years of not being able to see or talk to the person you love the most is too much of a punishment. This situation has destroyed me emotionally, mentally and even physically. I ended up consuming an unhealthy amount of alcohol, weeks of barely eating, not sleeping. I was a zombie for months. I was just functioning on automatic. I wanted to die, but I couldn't let myself die because I always held on to hope that she would come back. My therapist says it's really hard when you can't get closure from a relationship because your mind can't process that the relationship is over, so you're always thinking that person will knock on the door or that you'll wake up from sleep and they'll be there by your side. The divorce was finalized over a year ago. I'll be honest, I didn't make it easy. I didn't want to get divorced and I still don't understand how we can be divorced. I asked for couples therapy, but she refused. I know from my lawyer that her lawyer advised her to go at least once or twice. But she refused. It took quite a while, but finally the divorce happened. I can't even describe the feeling I felt and still feel, like if a piece of me had been cut out. I know I hurt her. I know I failed, but I think we all deserve a second chance. When I couldn't take the pain anymore, I decided to start therapy. My therapist doesn't give me advice to get her back, he only focuses on me moving on with my life, encouraging me to meet new people and go out on dates, but I don't want to. At this point I'm not even interested in sex anymore. A few days ago something happened that completely shattered me. I was having a few beers with my friend at my house, let's call him Nick, we were both pretty drunk. I started talking about my wife. And he said to me, "You should put more effort into getting over her, she's over you and is happy having a life away from you. You should do the same, you can't live in this self-pity all your life." Something in his words hit me, but not in the way he expected. He spoke with a lot of confidence that my wife is over me and is happy now. How does he know that? At this point, I got angry and started pressuring him to talk. He refused, I pressed as hard as I could, I cried, I begged him to tell me if he knew something. I needed to know something about her. Until he finally told me. His wife has been in contact with my wife for the last year. They were great friends and I remember Sabrina, my friend's wife, being very sad about losing contact with my wife. The thing is that my wife went to live in Norway, got married to a guy there and is about 7 months pregnant. I felt like dying. I literally felt like dying with this information. How could she do this to me? How could it be that while I was crying, getting drunk, missing her and wanting to die every day, she was happily on the other side of the world, getting married, fucking and getting pregnant by another guy? How could it be that she didn't have a child with me in many, many years, to the point that I thought she was infertile, but she got pregnant by this new guy so easily? Where did this guy come from? I have no answers for absolutely anything and I feel like I can't go on with my life without these answers. The only thing I can think of is that she had revenge sex with the first Norwegian guy she came across and got pregnant and decided to keep the baby. Maybe she got married because she wanted to stay in that country legally, and I guess like in most countries, getting married is a good option for that. I don't know. These thoughts are killing me. I refuse to think that she is in love with him. I need to contact her. I need to talk to her. I need to know what's going on, because she acts like our 10-year history and 8-year marriage is nothing to her. I need advice on how to act. I feel the impulse to travel to where she is and look for her, but how could I do that? I don't know what city she's in. I don't know where she lives, I don't have a number to contact her, she closed her social media, her family is small, they don't live in the same country as me and all of them blocked me. I'm totally lost. I don't know what to do at this point. I still want her back, yes, even pregnant. I feel like this is a nightmare and I need to wake up now. Edit. I read almost all the comments, and when I say almost all I really mean almost all. It's hard to process all the crap that's been said about me. I feel like you guys forget that you are talking to a person and not an inanimate object. I thought I might find more empathy by sharing my story here. Just 2 people feeling empathy towards me and their comments made me feel better. I'm not looking for validation or for anyone to say that what I did is okay. I know it's not and I have to live with that daily. I will try to respond, but of course I'll never be able to respond to all the comments over here. I guess none of you know what it's like to have a broken heart and not be able to get over a person. You don't decide who you love and you don't decide when you get over someone. It will happen when it has to. Those who doubt my story, unfortunately, are real. I would love this to be fake, but sadly it is not, and I have to live with this mess every day. Everyone assumes she's happy now. I don't know. I mean, how do you know? I haven't seen her in 2 years, I can't have any idea if she's happier or not. Being pregnant doesn't necessarily mean happiness, and being married either. We don't really know the circumstances of this marriage. Maybe she got married because she got pregnant and felt alone in a country where she has no one and she just holds on to the other guy. Of course I blame myself for this. This wouldn't have happened if I had been a better person and a better husband to her. But unfortunately I can't change what I did wrong. The only thing I could do is try to make it up to her, but how do you make it up to someone who doesn't want to give you the chance to do so? Some people said that she doesn't owe me a second chance. That was hard to read, but I understand that maybe she doesn't have to. I never openly blamed her for the infertility issues. It was just a thought. We both went to the doctor and in both cases the tests revealed that everything was fine. I never understood why we couldn't conceive, and the thought that she was infertile did cross my mind, and of course the idea that I was too. But in most cases of infertility it is due to a female factor. Maybe that's why I thought that. Horrible things were said, like I would hurt my ex-wife if she were here. I never physically hurt her and I never will. I am not an abusive person. I am not a monster. I know it's hard to empathize with me. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt her way beyond what I can say. But I am not a monster or a narcissist. Some people said that I never loved her, otherwise I wouldn't have cheated on her. This statement doesn't seem fair to me. You think you can kidnap the concept of love and tell another person what his real feelings are? You think you are inside my head or heart? Only then would you know what I feel. You can't tell me that I don't love her. There hasn't been a day since she left that I don't regret it. No one can tell me this isn't love. Lastly, humans are more complex than most people here think. Just because I cheated on her doesn't mean I don't love her or that I don't have feelings. I called what I did a mistake because how else would I call it? I thought part of accepting blame is accepting that it was my mistake. But everyone here takes those words as if I am trying to twist the situation when that's not the case. You've completely twisted my words. I know how much I hurt her. Maybe in my post I'm focusing on myself because I was never able to explain myself to her. Since then for me it's been one attempt after another to put together a story in my head that doesn't make sense. I lost everything from one moment to the next. I simply tried to be open with my feelings, but it doesn't seem to work here. Not for me at least. I know the damage I did to her. This woman left her life, the country she emigrated to, her friends, even her job. No one does that for a breakup unless you're going through some level of absolute pain. I understand that. I can see and feel the pain I put her through, and that makes me feel even more guilty. Honestly, I'm going to respond to some comments below and then log off of Reddit for a couple days until I feel in a better place. Relevant comments. Commenter, I want to know who you cheated on her with. That's pretty important information. OP, it was a radon woman that used to go to the same gym. Nothing important. It didn't mean anything, not even for a second. I was just being an idiot. Commenter. You don't seem to have any remorse for cheating, just mentioned she somehow found out. So you were not planning on telling her? It's been 2 years, you need to accept responsibility for your actions and let go. She's never coming back. There's billions of people out there, just heal and improve yourself with therapy and I'm sure you'll get a second chance with someone else. You're only 35. OP, I do feel remorse for cheating. I'm a big mess right now, but I do feel remorse. Commenter, you may still be in love. She is not, at least not with you. OP, so love just fade away? Just like this? At the end of the day this sometimes makes me feel like I'm actually more loyal than her to our relationship. Meaning? She left, remarried, got pregnant. Looks like she completely forgot about me and I'm here crying while I drink some wine and respond to some strangers on Reddit about our relationship. I still love her, but for her it was so easy for her over me. Commenter. If only half the people on Reddit had the self-respect your ex-wife has. OOP, I don't blame her, I understand the pain I caused her. But I also think there are many couples who go through this and move on, especially when it was just one time. I never had a side relationship for months. I didn't cheat on her with multiple women. I didn't get another woman pregnant. I didn't cheat on her with her friend. Cheating is wrong, but are you really going to put me on the same level as a guy who cheated on his wife for years or who cheated on his wife with her sister? It's not an excuse, but I'm asking for some coherency here. Update. Same post 2 days later. These days have been very strange. At times I feel numb and at others desperate. A lot of things have happened. I want to start by answering something and then I will update. Some people asked why Norway. I don't know exactly, but she is a polyglot. She speaks 6 languages. Many of these languages are connected to cultures that she always liked. Norwegian is just one of them. She has always been interested in Norwegian culture. She has been there before, but she is also interested in other cultures and speaks other languages, so for me that was never an indicator that she might have gone to this country. Regarding the update, the first thing I will say is that the post reached some people in my circle. Sabrina's sister is on Reddit. She knows the story and realized it was me. She told Sabrina. Sabrina is angry at Nick for revealing information. Nick is angry at me for posting on Reddit and because he says I pressured him to talk. I am angry at both of them for being two a-holes who watched me suffer for 2 years and decided not to help me. They didn't care about my marriage. Why should I care about their marriage? Sabrina could have given me my ex-wife's phone number a long time ago, but she decided to prioritize her friendship with my ex instead of helping two friends mend their marriage. Meanwhile, no one cared about my feelings. I'm done with them at this point. Regarding my ex-wife, I've been thinking a lot. She can't just disappear. I convinced myself that if I searched hard enough I could find something related to her. I follow some of her relatives from a fake Instagram account, but I never found anything related to her. I searched a lot, really a lot, and found a name that I had seen before, but that hadn't caught my attention until then. It was a lady with a name that is not typical in the United States or my wife's country. She is not American, and a very strange last name. I went to her Instagram profile and she had no pictures or anything, just a small profile picture that you can barely see. I decided to look her up on Facebook and found the same lady with the same profile picture. Only her Facebook profile is quite open. She is indeed a lady from Norway. I checked everything I could on this profile and I was convinced that it had something to do with my wife. How else would a relative of hers have this woman in their friends? I saw a lot of pictures, people, plants, mountains, gardens, lakes, flowers, typical things that an older lady posts. Until I came across a picture where my ex was dressed as a bride hugging a guy. I had to translate the text. The lady was congratulating her son on his wedding. There were a few more pictures, not many. There were even some members of my ex's family in the wedding pictures. The dates of the pictures were from a year ago. A year ago she married this guy. I don't understand. How could it happen so fast? When did she meet him? I honestly thought she got married after she got pregnant, not before. This baffles me even more. After that I found another picture. It was a group picture and she was far away, but of course I recognized her. The same guy was with his hands on her shoulders, hugging her. This picture was from February 2023. To be clear, she left in May 2022. How is she with someone in February 2023? Only 9 months and she's already in a stable enough relationship that he's introduced her to his family? What the hell is going on here? I feel like I have even more questions in my head now. I know I shouldn't be upset, but I am. I know I lost her because I was an idiot, but it's hard to get this feeling out of my head right now. Anyways, for those who had imagined this fantasy that my ex is with some kind of Norwegian Chris Hemsworth, let me tell you, it quote s not like that. This guy is too tall, too blonde, too pale, hair too long and kind of chunky to be honest. He looks more like the old cartoon of Vikings and is definitely not a Chris Hemsworth. I managed to find his FB profile, but he has almost nothing there. His profile says he's an engineer. An engineer who wears metal band t-shirts at 38. I don't know how to take this because I'm an engineer myself, just in a different field. Why would she look for a man with the same profession as me? My wife has always liked heavy metal, which I always found nasty, but I never complained. After all, your partner doesn't have to have the same musical tastes as you. I mention this because maybe that was the way they connected. She used to connect easily with people who liked the same type of music. I don't know, but I honestly look at it and think, where did she get this guy from? I meant he can definitely do better than this. The pregnancy thing still messes with my head. I try not to think about it. I can't understand it. I'm not infertile like the comments suggest. I've been to the doctor and I know I'm not. But God, it kills me to think that she's going to have another man's child. I don't get it. I feel like this is beyond anything I ever imagined. And no, I'm not going to go to Norway. I'm not going to try to contact her. I still want to see her and talk to her. But I obviously can't force her to do that. I have too much to deal with right now and too much to talk about in therapy. If by any chance this post reaches my ex, I want you to know that I still love you. You know where to contact me. If by any chance this post reaches the new dude, I want you to know the only reason you have a chance with this woman is because a big idiot halfway across the world completely ruined it. You most probably met a woman who was probably very broken from her divorce. You took advantage of her situation and trapped her with a baby. You don't know how to play fair. Am I the asshole for disappearing after my wife demanded half of everything in divorce after cheating with her ex? I had felt that the day couldn't get any worse, but I was mistaken. The entire week at work had been terrible, and to top it all off, my employer, the company president, summoned me to his office to chastise me for a mistake done by someone else. When I arrived home, I noticed that my sister-in-law's car had blocked my driveway, preventing me from parking in front of my house. The neighbor's adolescent son and his pals had clogged the street with parked automobiles, forcing me to park 3 doors away. As I entered the house, I wondered why I was even bothering. My connection with my wife's sister, Susan, has been difficult since we first met. I couldn't understand why, but she seemed to have an instinctive hate for me. Furthermore, I had little hope for an intimate evening with my wife Janice, because we hadn't been intimate in nearly a month, despite my best attempts. When I arrived at my driveway, I noticed an empty garbage can by the curb and hauled it around the side of the house through the side gate to place it near to the back door. As I entered the kitchen, I could hear music and the chatter of my wife and her sister in the living room. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and took a sip before stepping into the living room. However, a sentence I overheard at the entrance stopped me in my tracks. God, he fucked me 3 times today. It was not from my sister-in-law, but from my dear wife. Ever since Brandon came back last month, I just can't get enough of him. I told my wife. I recognized Brandon as my wife's ex-boyfriend, who had abandoned her and moved away. Curious, my wife's sister inquired. So what are you going to do now? Janice responded, Brandon wants me to move in with him, so I will hire a lawyer and file for divorce. This is a communal property state, thus I will get half of everything. I'd heard more than enough. Numbly, I walked to the rear door and retraced my steps to my car. Opening the door, I slumped into the driver's seat, comprehending why I'd been denied intimacy. My wife was sharing it with someone else, but now she wants half of everything. The worst aspect was that the state was likely to give it to her. Janice and I got married 3 years ago. She had left her job immediately after our vows, and when she was at home, she never moved. I hired a maid 3 times a week to clean the house and do the laundry, and she also cooked dinner. The rest of the time, I cooked or she got takeout. I know what you're thinking, but love puts blinders on me. She kept me satisfied by offering good sex till about a month ago. My mother died when I was 13, a heartbreaking loss for both my father and me. Dad did his utmost to raise me properly, and we grew quite close. Losing Dad to a drunk driver when I was 23 was a devastating blow, especially since I had just met Janice the previous year. Inheriting over $2.5 million from Dad, I properly invested the money under the supervision of a competent broker. Despite Janice's attempts to squander every penny I made, I had an additional $100,000 in savings. I had never touched the bequest, allowing it to grow despite the current economic climate. I had enough to live comfortably and did not need to waste it. My love for Janice prompted us to overlook a prenuptial agreement, which is a common error made by couples who believe their marriage will endure forever. This error meant she could possibly collect about $1.5 million from me for the privilege of spreading her legs. The state was all too eager to encourage this sanctioned kind of exploitation. She had discussed hiring a lawyer, indicating that she was not yet ready to serve me. I knew I had time to act. I sat in my car, devising a strategy, keeping an eye on the rearview mirror until I noticed my sister-in-law's car pull out and drive away. I started the car, did a U-turn, and walked back to my driveway. When I entered the house, Janice was nowhere to be found, so I went to the kitchen for another drink. After popping the lid and taking a long sip, I considered my next steps. Oh, there you are, honey, Janice said as she entered the kitchen. I didn't hear you come in. Hello, sweetie, I have just gotten in. Been a long day, I said with a warm smile, determined to play the part as convincingly as she did. I didn't have time to order anything for dinner, she admitted with a small pout. Although I wanted to respond, that's because you spent the day with your boyfriend, discussing all the details with your sister, I said, that's fine, dear. I'll just reheat some leftovers from last night. She gave me a nice grin, kissed my cheek and said she was going to take a hot bath. I smiled and nodded, thinking, yeah, gotta wash all that away. When she went, I grabbed a plate of fried rice and ate it cold while drinking another 2 beers. After tossing the empty container, I returned to the den and sat on the chair, channel surfing. I decided on an old movie. Janice arrived about a half hour later and sat on the couch until the film concluded. Standing up, she stated she was sleepy and was going to bed. Yeah, tired of being unfaithful, I thought to myself. I informed her that I would watch the news and join her later. I hadn't paid much attention to the film, my mind was preoccupied with planning my next move. Knowing I couldn't do anything until Monday, I got through the following 3 days, working in the yard on Saturday and playing golf with friends on Sunday. On Monday, I contacted the broker who was handling my inheritance portfolio and requested that everything be liquidated. Being in senior management enabled me to take out my 401k quickly, penalty be darned. By Thursday, I was prepared to make my move. Returning home to my apparently loving wife, I informed her of an emergency crisis, explaining that I would be away for a week on corporate business. I packed only 2 suitcases. When we moved into this house, I kept everything significant to me. None of it suited her taste, therefore there was nothing else I wanted. The furnishings were her pick and I honestly couldn't care less about them. The bright lining in this situation was that we were renting the house, so I had no financial stake in it. After selling my condo, we were looking for the ideal house to buy. When I say right, I refer to her standards. So far, none of the houses we've looked at appeared to suit her criteria. On Friday morning, I kissed my wife on the cheek one final time before carrying my baggage out. I loaded them into my Lexus and drove away without looking back. My first trip was at an old friend's house, Jake, whom I trusted entirely. He was surprised when I suggested switching titles for his older but rebuilt 4-wheel drive vehicle. An hour after confiding in him about my condition, I was on my way west. I doubted anyone would associate me with this vehicle, and Jake promised to keep the automobile I traded him hidden in the garage for a while. For the next 4 days, I paid for everything with cash. I canceled all of our credit cards to avoid leaving a paper trail. My broker had ensured that the majority of my money was safely deposited in an offshore account. I have a system in place with him to handle fund transfers as needed. I had enough money hidden in the SUV to last a while. The nights alone in motels were the most difficult. For the preceding week, I had been too preoccupied with carrying out my plan to think about what had occurred to me personally. I had adored Janice. I would not have married her otherwise. I ran through several what-if situations in my head, but I eventually realized that there wasn't much I could have done differently. Even if I knew her ex-boyfriend had returned, I doubt I could have kept them away. I came to 2 conclusions. She had probably never truly loved me, and it was my own responsibility for marrying her. On my 5th day away from home, I found myself seated in a mom-and-pop cafe in a small Montana town. I wondered what my purportedly devoted wife was up to, as she must have found that all of her credit cards had been canceled and our bank account was empty. My thoughts were interrupted by an elderly couple at the adjacent table, whose hushed chat I couldn't help but listen. The man, who appeared to be in his late 50s, was telling his red-haired wife about his desire for additional help on their farm. Unfortunately, they could not afford to hire anyone until their present calves were market-ready. Even still, finding someone ready to work for a price they could afford was difficult. After finishing the final mouthful of my dinner, I rose up and approached their table, apologizing for eavesdropping but offering to help them. The elder man examined me, sizing me up. "I don't understand how you could do it. If you heard what we were discussing, you'd know I can't pay you anything. What if I just need a place to stay in exchange for my labor?" I proposed. His eyes narrowed. "Colleen, excuse us for a moment while I speak with this young man outside," he told his wife. He stood up and waited for me to follow him. He turned to face me once we were at the parking lot, where our chat would be private. I guessed him to be around my height, 6 feet, with broad shoulders and no fat. His once dark hair was mostly gray, and his face bore the rough lines of years spent laboring outside. "Who in the hell are you? Are you a part of that Wilson ranch?" he inquired, his tone hinting of mistrust. I lifted my hands defensively, saying, "Hold on, mister. I know nothing about any Wilson. I moved here from Texas 4 days ago and arrived this morning. I figured maybe we could help each other out." He said, "If what you claim is true, why would you want to help us? I cannot afford to pay you. What is in it for you? We don't need any difficulty if you're fleeing the police." I responded, "I'm probably on the run as you put it, but not like you may think." I went on to tell my story about my unfaithful wife wanting to take me to the cleaners and how I needed a place to stay for a time. I have not robbed or killed anyone. I'm simply attempting to keep what is rightfully mine. If you have a location where I can remain, I will compensate you with my efforts. I'll pay my own way, and if you don't think I'm much assistance, let me know, and I'll be on my way with no hard feelings. He scrutinized my face and replied, "If what you're saying to me is true, I think I'd be a fool not to give you a chance. However, I must inform you that the Wilsons are attempting to convince me to sell them my land. They haven't done anything illegal yet, but I wouldn't put it past them. You might be taking on more than you can handle." I told him that was a risk I was willing to accept. He then asked about my ranching experience, and I was honest, stating that I had spent a few summers on my uncle's ranch in Texas, but I was not a cowboy. He extended his hand and we shook hands to confirm our agreement. He advised me to call him by his first name, Bill, and identify myself. We returned to the diner, where Colleen waited. He yelled out to her, "Colleen, this is Carson. He'll be working for us if he can handle it." She stood and extended her hand. I shook it and she greeted me cordially. "It's very nice to meet you, Carson." Her voice was clear, with possibly a tinge of Irish accent. She was as trim and fit as her husband. "It's nice to meet you too, ma'am," I commented. She said, "My last name is Buckman, but you can just call me Colleen. Formality isn't particularly useful in this section of the country." I was quickly drawn to this charming lady. Bill suggested we go back to the ranch. Before leaving town, he stopped up to a general store, where we both got out of our cars. He suggested I get some ranch-appropriate clothing. When he entered the store, the proprietor greeted him warmly, clearly recognizing him as a regular customer. I purchased a coat and a set of Western-style riding boots. It sufficed for a week. It took around 20 minutes to drive from the general store to the main gate, which was arched with the words Rocking Bee Ranch. Bill's brand name was Rocking Bee. Another mile of private road led to the main home, which was set on a rise. Their 2-story house was well kept and newly painted. Behind it, a barn and several outbuildings became visible. The pickup they drove was partially laden with grocery sacks, indicating a weekly trip into town for supplies. I pulled up behind them, loaded my arms with bags and followed the Buckmans inside the kitchen. In 2 trips, we emptied the vehicle. Bill directed me to drive around the back, where he showed me a little cabin for my stay. As I drove around, I noticed him standing in front of the cabin. When I got out, he pointed to the cabin and indicated that Sam used a similar one a few yards away, adding that Sam was out doing the rounds and I'd see him later. After unpacking my baggage, he waited while I settled into my cabin. It had a single spacious room with a bed against one wall, a table and 2 seats, a potbelly wood burner in one corner, and a bathroom with a single stone shower. It wasn't extravagant, but it was clean and provided me with a good place to remain for the time being, allowing me to hopefully escape being discovered by Janice. When I returned outside, he was sitting in his pickup, telling me to get in. He gave me a tour of the ranch, which included over 6,000 acres of grazing with a few hundred acres dedicated aside for planting winter feed. The ranch's back half, which was mountainous and covered in forest, led to mountains and a stream that ran through the property and was only accessible by horseback. He explained that he used to have 3 full-time employees, but Sam was the only one who remained during difficult times. Sam had been working at the ranch for about 30 years. They employed additional personnel during roundups to pick cattle for the market. He dropped me off at the small cabin. "By the way, I noticed you have a laptop. I have a satellite connection with a router, so you can use the internet wirelessly. Supper is in the main house, and we usually eat at 6, he explained before driving away. I was settled in less than 30 minutes, giving me enough time to load up my computer. As he had said, I was able to establish a Wi-Fi connection and rapidly check my emails. Jake sent one message claiming that Janice had reported me missing to the police, who were investigating my absence. It gave me something to think about. Jake was the only person I had told about leaving, and even he had no idea where I was heading. I mailed my resignation to my old company but did not inform them in person of my departure. Just before 6 p.m., I approached the main home and knocked on the door. Bill motioned for me to enter, and as I did, I noticed Colleen preparing lunch as Bill stood to the side, speaking to a man I believed was Sam. Bill motioned me over. "Hi Sam. This is Carson, the new hand I mentioned for today. We'll see how he feels about it tomorrow after a day's work," Bill added, smiling broadly. "Carson, meet Sam." Sam smiled warmly at me and offered his hand. A huge man, at least 6'3", who, like Bill, appeared to have worked hard his entire life and appeared to be about Bill's age. One important detail. He was African American. I shook his hand and felt the power in his grip. "Well, young fellow, we hope you enjoy it here." "I could use some help," he remarked. At 28, I was roughly half his age, so he considered me youthful. I responded, "I intend to give it my best shot." Colleen called us to sit down since supper was ready. Bill and his wife sat at opposite ends of the table, leaving Sam and myself sitting between them, across from each other. On the table was a large platter of pork chops, a large dish of mashed potatoes, another with fresh green beans, and a plate piled high with clearly baked biscuits. "We don't eat fancy here, Carson, but there's plenty, and it's filling," Colleen told him. "It looks great," I said. As we ate, I asked Bill if he had been here his entire life, and he said, "Yes, my grandpa started this ranch and passed it down to my father. It now belongs to both me and Colleen. However, when I was younger, I wasn't sure she'd be a part of it. I had to fight off every man to get her." He looked at his wife, and I could see the intensity of his feelings for her in his eyes. She replied, "Now Bill, you know you're the only man I've ever had feelings for. I just needed to make sure you wanted me enough." Bill subsequently stated, "My wife has been responsible for the 3 happiest days of my life. The day she agreed to marry me, the day she did marry me, and the day she gave birth to our daughter Caitlin. I hadn't seen any signs of a daughter, and Colleen must have seen my curiosity. Our daughter is away right now. She is completing her PhD degree in veterinary sciences at South Dakota State University. She has only been able to return home for the holidays and we are eagerly awaiting her graduation," Colleen explained. "She's supposed to be home in a couple of months," Bill told me. "It'll be nice to have a vet in the family, should cut down on some of the expenses." After supper, I tried to help clean the dishes, but Colleen maintained it was her responsibility and shooed me away. Bill indicated that breakfast was at 5:30 and work would start at 6 o'clock. As Sam and I were leaving, I saw a copy of today's New York Times on the counter, which had most likely been picked up by Bill while in town. I asked to borrow the front page, and he agreed. Once outdoors, I asked Bill to enter my cabin for a bit. Inside, I brought out my digital camera and demonstrated how to operate it. I asked him to snap a close-up of me holding the front page of the newspaper. I could see he was inquisitive, but he did not inquire. He asked about an alarm clock and I told him I had one. He said he'd see me in the morning and then went. I downloaded the image to my computer and composed an email, along with a note to the police in my previous hometown. The message indicated that I was alive and healthy and had left town on my own volition. Choosing a national newspaper over a local one left my whereabouts uncertain. I forwarded the email to Jake and told him to utilize one of the local coffee shops with free internet access. I gave him my password so he could send the original email and image to the police without leaving any trace. This manner, I intended to avoid being added to any FBI or national missing person databases. Assuming the police would not devote significant resources to the search for a wayward husband, I slept soundly that night. The next morning, I got up at 5 o'clock, showered, and dressed in time to walk Sam to the main house. After lunch, Bill told Sam to put me to work fixing fence posts in the hilly portion. Following Sam to the barn, he pointed out a horse and saddle that I would need. He appeared pleased with how I saddled the huge brown horse, drawing on my experience at my uncle's ranch. We then loaded 2 mules with saddle packs, fence posts and a post hole digger. Bill arrived at the barn with a Winchester Model 94 and a saddle scabbard, stating that it was mostly for the rare occasion when we would need to put down a sick cow. Sam and I mounted up and led a mule each, heading up the creek toward the hills. As Sam and I rode, we talked and got to know each other. I told him how I wound up in Montana, confident that he would not violate my trust. In reply, he shared his own experiences. He had married shortly after high school, only to find his ex-wife in bed with another man. In a moment of wrath, he nearly killed the guy, earning a 5-year prison sentence. When he was released, Bill was the only one ready to give him a chance, and that was how he had spent the previous 30 years. Sam praised Bill and Colleen, calling them the salt of the earth. We arrived at the fence that marked the property borders about half an hour later. Sam pointed out that not all of the posts needed to be replaced, but simply those that had decayed or were close to it, which was about every third one. He stayed with me as I replaced the first 2 to verify I was doing everything correctly. He proposed working until around 4 o'clock, giving me enough time to go home, care for the horse and mules and get to dinner at 6 o'clock. His parting advice was to follow the stream back down, so I wouldn't get lost. He went back, leaving me alone with my task. I continued along the line, replacing old posts with new ones. At noon, I took a break and collected the pork chop sandwiches Colleen had given me earlier from my saddlebag. I finished my sandwiches and went back to work. My watch's alarm went off at 4 p.m., and I realized I had set all but a few of the posts that the mules had carried up. Leading the mules, I went back down the fence line until I reached the stream and started descending, right before leaving the trees. I found a natural pool where the water ran in and out. I paused to take in the view, recognizing it as the most beautiful and quiet area on the ranch. Back at the barn, I was able to unsaddle the animals and get them fed on time. While I was looking at the horses, Sam came into bed. We rushed to shower and change before dinner, where we ate steaks. That night, weary, I made little contributions to the discourse and excused myself quickly after supper to go to bed. Sleep arrived fast, and I slept deeply. I woke up hurting all over. My hands ached from using the post hole digger, and my arms, shoulders and legs throbbed. Despite my frequent workouts, there was a significant difference between a 2-hour gym session and a full day of fence post installation. Bill and Sam chuckled as I staggered into the kitchen and winced while sitting down. Even Colleen couldn't keep her grin hidden. Despite the stiffness, I was hungry and gladly consumed my breakfast. "Ready for another day of fencing?" Bill inquired as we rose from the table. I moaned and said, "Yes, sir," trying to sound more positive than I felt. Bill laughed. "I guess you can take it easy today. I would prefer you to ride the rounds with Sam." I nodded gratefully. The first step was to clean the stalls and restock the hay. After putting the horses and mules in the pasture and filling their feeders, we loaded into the pickup and began our ranch inspection. Our major goal was to keep no calves down or removed from their mothers. Sam's knowledge of the ranch appeared instinctive, as he effortlessly predicted where the cattle would be and roughly calculated their numbers. After 30 years, everything appeared to come effortlessly for him. As we approached the far end of the ranch, Sam paused the truck and looked around. Something on one of the hills piqued his interest, so he handed me his binoculars and pointed to a certain location. After a minute, I noticed 2 calves, presumably alone. I asked, "Where are their mothers?" He motioned to 2 cows along the tree line. "That's them over there. Their calves must have strayed into the trees, got lost and continued on. We'll need to pull them down." I inquired, "Are we hiking up there?" "No, it's too far. We'll go back and load up a few horses." The trucks had 2-way radios, so Sam called Bill and told him what we'd observed and that we were on our way to rescue the horses. When we returned to the stable, Bill had already saddled 2 horses and loaded them onto a trailer. All we needed to do was stock up and go. Sam guided us close to the forest line below where the calves were, and we unloaded the horses before riding up into the hills. Sam's 30 years on the ranch became clear once more, as he knew the land like the back of his hand. Half an hour later, we eased up behind the calves and gradually began pushing them back down the slopes. I couldn't help but grin when we cleared the trees and the mischievous kids spotted their mothers. They went wailing to their mothers and instantly found a teat to suckle on. The larger cows stood peacefully, letting their calves to eat. I was struck by how different it was from my childhood. That night's dinner was fried chicken, corn on the cob, and mashed potatoes. With renewed zest, I spoke more than the night before and learned more about Colleen. Her parents moved to the United States from Ireland when she was 5 years old. Her father, captivated by tales of the Old West, had brought the family to Montana, which explains the Irish accent in her speech. Growing up in America, she nevertheless felt the influence of her parents. The next day, feeling much better, I returned after breakfast to replace fence posts. Sam helped me load the mules, but this time I went out on my own. Following the stream took me directly to my objective. This day was easier than the first because I had learnt certain techniques to make the labor less stressful. Just before 4 o'clock, I finished the last post and returned to the barn. With some free time, I worked some of the stalls before cleaning up for dinner. On my 4th day, I assisted Sam in repairing some of the buildings, and the next day, I installed more fence posts. The next 2 months went by, and now it was my turn to ride the ranch and check on the cattle. I was in the best physical form of my life. We worked out a timetable in which Sam took Saturdays off, Bill took Sundays off, and I took Mondays off. I spent my day doing laundry and running into town when needed. I'd become fond of everyone on the property. Sam was kind and easygoing, and we frequently sat and talked after dinner. I had a lot of regard for Bill, who was honest and diligent. We got along well. Colleen was lovely to Sam and me, but I could tell she had some fire in her. She and Bill made a wonderful couple. Colleen and Bill were getting thrilled. Colleen informed me over breakfast on Friday that her daughter would be going home in 1 week. It was my job that day to ride a horse around the wooded area, looking for livestock that had wandered into the hills. A little after 4 o'clock, I made my way to the creek, turned to follow it down, and arrived at the pool below the waterfall. I came to a stop, dismounted, removed my shirt, and knelt beside the stream. I dipped my bandana into the cool water and began washing the perspiration and dust off my face and neck. A whinny from downstream drew my attention, and I turned to my right to see a horse and rider coming. At first, I assumed it was Colleen, but then realized it was a younger version of her. This stunning woman could only be Caitlin, who has the same crystal blue eyes and red hair as her mother. She rode up and came to a stop a few feet away from me. As I rose up to confront her, she replied in a chilly tone, "Who are you and what are you doing on this property?" I said, "The name's Carson, and I work here." She responded, I do not believe you. My father said he couldn't afford to pay another hand. Despite her beauty, I was growing annoyed by her unpleasant demeanor, so I answered, yeah, I heard that too. I guess that's why I chuckle all the way to the bank on payday. She looked at me, reined her horse around and kicked it in the flanks. I chuckled to myself, pulled my shirt back on, remounted my horse and rode towards the barn. Later I discovered there had been a misunderstanding between Caitlin and her parents. They expected her to return the following week, but she arrived just a few hours after I left. She had spent the morning and early afternoon with her parents before expressing her desire to go for a ride, which she had not had time for at school but enjoyed doing. So she saddled up and headed to her favorite location, the waterfall and pool of water. I suppose after 2 months I was old news, and Bill and Colleen had forgotten about me. Just as I returned to the barn, I noticed the redhead's back vanish inside. I dismounted and left my horse inside. Caitlin must have been looking for her father and eventually located him in the barn. I could hear her loud voice as she inquired, "Who is that man that was up at the waterfall?" Bill paused for a moment and said, "That must have been Carson." She went on, "He said he works here, but last time I was here, you told me you couldn't afford to pay another hand." Bill responded, "Well, he's correct, he works here. I don't think it's your business how much he's paid. I'm still running this ranch, young woman." She grumbled, "But he said you pay him so much that he laughs all the way to the bank." By that time, I'd entered the barn. She had her back to me and did not notice me, whereas Bill did. He smiled and continued, "Is that true, Carson? If you believe you are overpaying, I can correct that." She turned around and locked eyes with me. I took off my cap with one hand. I removed my hat with one hand and scratched the back of my head with the other, adding, "Well, I wouldn't want to take advantage of you, Bill. How much are you planning to lower my wages?" At that, Bill and I both burst out laughing. Caitlin, on the other hand, continued to stare at both of us, unable to see the humor. "Sweetheart, just so you get that bee out of your bonnet, Carson gets to stay in the cabin next to Sam's," Bill told her. She answered, "And what else?" Bill replied, "That, and he gets to eat your mother's fine cooking." Caitlin persisted, "So you're claiming you're not paying him? Why should he work for nothing?" Bill said, "He has his reasons, and it's not my place to tell you." I continued, "Working to have a chance to taste your mother's cooking is worth a lot, and I don't think she would like to hear you say that it's nothing." She gave me one last sneer before storming out of the barn. Bill shook his head and commented, "She reminds me so much of her mother when she was younger. I never thought I would be able to tame Colleen." Caitlin joined us for supper that night. She sat next to Sam on the opposite side of the table as me. When I entered the kitchen, she shot me another piercing glare. Before speaking, I waited until everyone's plates were full. I remarked in a nice manner, "Your mother informed me that you have completed your doctorate in veterinary medicine." "Yeah," was her one-word response, delivered without looking up. I added, "Sam claims there's only one other vet in the area, and he's well than 30 miles distant. I'm sure you'll be a valuable asset to the people in this area." She looked up at my compliment and I think I noticed her eyes soften slightly. "Yes, that's Dr. Harrison. He has more business than he can handle and is frequently required to be in multiple locations at once." Colleen then said, "I agree with you, Carson. Our Caitlin will be able to deliver excellent service." Caitlin spent the rest of the lunch talking with her parents and Sam, who had been on the ranch since before she was born. She did not address me directly, and I mostly kept quiet. This was her homecoming, and I knew her parents and Sam wanted to know what had happened in her life while she was gone. When I finished eating, I excused myself and went to bed. I returned to my cabin and checked my email, which showed that I had received one from Jake. He said that he had spoken with a friend on the police force and casually inquired whether they still regarded me as a missing person. His companion stated that everything was dropped once they received the email containing the image I had provided them. Brandon had supposedly dumped Janice as soon as he discovered I had vanished with all of the money, and it didn't look like Janice was going to get any of it. Of course, she couldn't afford the rent in the house where we were staying and was now working as a waitress in a city apartment. She did not have enough money to employ a lawyer to pursue me. I found it ironic. She had clearly married me for my money, and her boyfriend had desired her for the same reason. My money. I was still working on repairing the fence posts. I now only do it every third or fourth day. I had gotten off the hill and was able to drive my pickup to work. It was really easier to load the posts in the rear of the truck than on the mules. The morning after Caitlin got home, I filled the pickup with posts and returned to where I had left off. When it was time for lunch, I wandered to the vehicle and remembered I hadn't brought my food. If any of us were going to be working away from the main home all day, Colleen would make sure we had lunch, and I think I forgot to pick mine up. I could have driven back to the house, but I figured missing one supper wouldn't kill me. A half hour later, I had just put a pole and was attaching the wire when I heard a car approach. I looked back and noticed it was one of the ranch pickups. The truck came to a stop just as I completed writing that post. I turned around and was astonished to see Caitlin exit. She was holding a tiny sack, similar to the ones Colleen used for our lunches. "Mama said you forgot your lunch," she remarked, pushing the bag at me. I leaned out to take it from her. "Thank you, Caitlin." "That was very nice of you," I said. I looked in the bag and saw 2 sandwiches, as usual. I took one out and gave her the other, but she declined. I shrugged my shoulders, sat on the truck's tailgate and began eating. She strolled up to where I was, about 5 feet to the side, and simply stared. I ate silently, keeping my eyes focused in front of me. "Why are you here?" she inquired last. I turned to look at her and decided to tease her. "Don't tell anyone, but I robbed a bank and hid the money. I'm hiding out here till the heat goes off and I can get the money." Her eyes widened briefly before glaring at me. "You're a real clown," she muttered before turning to leave. I waited until she was halfway to her truck before calling her. She paused and slowly turned around, and I continued. "I married a lady who never loved me and simply wanted what I could provide for her. I came here because I wanted to be away from all I knew for a bit." She glanced at me again, and I believe she realized I was telling the truth this time. She nodded and departed without saying anything else. As she drove away, I remembered what her father had said about her mother being like her when she was that age. He claimed to have tamed her, but I suspected the real secret was their love for each other. It had been less than 24 hours since I first met Caitlin, and I couldn't fathom a guy taming that fiery redhead. That night's supper was almost identical to the previous nights. Caitlin had chats with both her parents and Sam. I didn't feel slighted because she didn't know me and we didn't have anything in common. We were just finishing dinner when there was a knock on the door, which Bill went to answer. He entered the kitchen, followed by a man of my age. He was what ladies would describe as tall, dark, and gorgeous. Caitlin eagerly screamed out his name, leaped out of her seat and hugged him. It was clear they knew each other. They were talking about how long it had been since they had seen one other. A few minutes later, there was another tap on the door, and Bill went to answer it, returning with another man, this time fair-haired but also attractive. Caitlin greeted him with similar warmth. I remembered Bill telling me that he had to fend off every male surrounding him in order to win his wife. Caitlin was every bit as attractive as her mother. I excused myself from the table and went back to my cabin, mentally wishing the 2 guys luck. Nonetheless, I envied them. If Caitlin turned out to be the lady her mother was, whoever gained her heart would be a fortunate guy. The next day, I drove the pickup around the ranch. By the time I finished my rounds, something didn't seem to add together. It was early enough that I returned to get Sam, and we had a quick tour of the property. There were a lot of cattle scattered over the ranch, but he agreed that something didn't seem right. It just seemed like we were missing a few herds. We decided to saddle up the following day and tackle the hilly parts. We discussed it with Bill at supper that night and he agreed with our approach. It poured that night, making finding traces more difficult. The next morning we placed our horses into a trailer and Bill drove us to one end of the property. I rode approximately a third of the way up the tree line, while Sam rode another third higher. We then traveled across the ranch, across the hills, and through the trees. It took a significant portion of the day to reach the far side. We counted 5 wandering herds. Bill greeted us as we emerged from the hills, and we loaded the horses into the trailer and proceeded back. We reviewed the situation and concluded that the only thing we could do was become more vigilant. Caitlin received a call from another suitor during dinner that night. I overheard her mother say something about it being the 3rd one that day. Guys were coming out of the woodwork to get her attention as word spread that she had returned home. We spent the next 4 days observing the herd. Everything appeared to be fine, with the exception of the alleged original loss. Caitlin's suitors made repeated visits. She'd been home for a week and hadn't spoken to me since the day she delivered my lunch. On the 5th day following the cattle's apparent disappearance, I told Bill I wanted to ride the property line across the hills. We had already covered the fence lines throughout the grazing regions and found no evidence that the missing cattle had passed through them. Sam dropped me off on the west side of the ranch. This was where Bill's ranch met the Wilson Ranch. About halfway to the southwest corner, I noticed 3 new sets of horse footprints. They crossed from Wilson's side of the fence to Bill's. The fact that the fence wire was still up seemed strange. I dismounted and examined the fence posts, discovering that the staples had loosened on 5 posts and were barely holding the wire up. Remove the staples and lower the wire so you may cross over. After reinstalling the wire and staples, everything appeared normal. I remounted and followed the traces. When I approached the stream, I noticed 3 horses tied to a tree a short distance above the waterfall. I was still approximately 30 yards distant. I hurriedly got down, hitched my horse to a tree and took the gun out of its sheath. When I neared the horses, I noticed boot prints leading downstream. I crept up to the waterfall's brink, peered down, and gasped. Caitlin was naked in the water, as if she had just been born. I was captivated by the scene. She was swimming across the water, her naked body clearly visible in the pure water. Damn. She had an adorable ass. A movement in the trees to her right brought me back to consciousness. I rapidly examined the area, noticing 1 guy on the right and 2 more near the pond on the left. I raised my firearm and fired. The bullet struck the guy on the right at his feet. 1 more fast pull on the trigger and the earth burst near the 2 people on the left. Caitlin let out a blood-curdling scream that resonated throughout the trees. I stood up where everyone could see me and said, "On your bellies immediately, I'm not going to miss the next shot. Caitlin, stay just where you are." She didn't notice the 3 men. All she saw was me standing over her, holding a rifle, and she scrambled to conceal herself. One of the men on the left flinched as if he was about to flee, but the bark on the tree next to him erupted as I pressed the trigger again. He was persuaded and dropped flat. Caitlin noticed the 2 men around the location of my shot. She screamed again. I began counting down, and before I could say 1, the other 2 dropped down. I instantly commanded them to place their hands behind their heads, which they did. I hurriedly begged Caitlin to go and get dressed. She tried to resist, but I hissed at her to do as I said. She was plainly terrified, and I could see her shivering from where I was, but she followed orders and walked out of the pool like Venus emerging from the sea. Even though she had her back to me, I couldn't take my gaze away from her. I'd never forget her alabaster skin and wonderfully rounded buttocks. She slipped on her jeans and blouse, swung up upon her horse and disappeared through the trees with a single kick. When she left, I told the men to get up, lie down, and put their hands behind their heads. Only when all 3 laid before me did I let out a sigh of relief. I thought it was time to bluff. "So, what will I do with you 3? I suppose I could just shoot you in the legs and watch you bleed to death." The 3 men began begging me to spare them. I continued. "Even if I spare you, Caitlin's father will assure justice when I inform him of your horrible plans for his daughter. Unless, of course, you have a more compelling confession for the sheriff, such as cattle rustling. It may result in jail time, but it will at least give you a chance at life." The tiniest of them cracked. "Yes, we accomplished it." Wilson claimed that breaking Buckman would safeguard his land. His colleague hushed him to silence up, but he shouted, "I ain't dying for no damn cows." I chose to purchase more time because I expected Caitlin to return soon and her father to conduct an investigation. As expected, 45 minutes later, Bill and Sam galloped into view. I signaled them down, and they dashed up to join me atop the rise. "What in the hell is happening?" Bill required. "It looks like some of Wilson's hands paid us an unexpected visit." I trailed them from the barrier to here. Caitlin was swimming when these 3 tried to creep up on her. I looked over and pushed the barrel of my rifle to the smaller man's neck. "I believe this one has something he wants to confess to you." When I prodded him again, he whimpered. "We did it. We took some of your cattle, but Wilson forced us." Bill tipped his cap back, smirking at Sam, and added, "You know, when my grandfather ran this ranch they used to hang horse thieves and cattle rustlers. Sometimes justice appears simpler back then. Unfortunately, we have to be civilized these days." While Sam stood guard, Bill and I decided to lead the rustlers back down. With rifles in hand, we followed them, Sam tying their horses together and bringing up the rear. When we arrived at the buildings, we escorted the rustlers into the barn, separating them into stalls with open doors so we could keep an eye on them without seeing one another. Bill went into the home to summon the sheriff, while Sam and I stood guard. In less than 30 minutes, the sheriff rushed up the mile-long driveway. Bill met him and briefed him on the current occurrences. I suggested bringing out the lesser offender first for the sheriff to question, and he agreed. I instantly took my prisoner outside. Initially apprehensive, the small rustler appeared to reconsider his quiet and began speaking. The sheriff glanced at Bill and stated, "It appears we have a straightforward case of trespassing here." Honestly, it's a waste of my time, but I suppose I could leave them in your capable hands. Forget I saw them, and I'll let you handle the situation." The terrified rustler's eyes widened and he abruptly opened up. The sheriff soon discovered the truth and called for assistance. Soon, a convoy of sheriff cars rolled into Wilson's huge ranch. Despite its vast size, the sheriff pinpointed the spot provided by the rustler and discovered nearly 100 stolen cattle with the rocking bee mark. Wilson and his cohorts were jailed before the end of the day. We didn't get together for meals until after 9 p.m., despite the chaos. Caitlin, despite sitting at the table, kept her gaze fixated on her plate. "What were you doing out there?" Bill queried, addressing her, as he hadn't had much time to speak with her. "I was just swimming." "I didn't think anyone would come and spy on me," she said accusingly. I interjected, "First of all, Caitlin, I was not spying on you. I followed their horse trails to the water. Second, contemplate what would have happened if I had not been present. I doubt the three were planning a picnic when they spotted you swimming shirtless." Colleen said, "Thank goodness you arrived when you did, Carson." I shudder to think about what may have happened. The discussion changed, and we rapidly completed our lunch, cognizant of the early start the next day. Caitlin cried out to me as she exited the kitchen and headed toward my cabin. I came to a halt and waited as she rudely asked, "So did you enjoy the view today?" Expecting thanks proved too idealistic, so I said, "Let's just say I'd be dishonest if I claimed it wasn't breathtaking." She huffed and turned on her heels, heading towards the house. I stood there, shaking my head, admitting that there was something about me that always drew her in. The next day, Bill had to travel into town to submit formal charges against Wilson. Returning the stolen animals to their appropriate place would take many days because the prosecutor needed to fully document the case first. Sam and I spent the day renewing the paint on a few of the barns. We had lunch in the kitchen, but Caitlin elected not to join us, which suited me perfectly. Bill arrived in the early afternoon, but waited until dinner to discuss the developments. He stated that because this was not a capital case, Wilson and his accomplices will be released on bond. While he did not foresee any further trouble, he advised us to be cautious. He looked at his daughter, grinned mischievously and added, "If you're planning another naked swim anytime soon, maybe you should bring Carson along for protection." Her face flushed pink again, and she sputtered as she stood and dashed into the room. Bill and Sam burst out laughing, and Colleen couldn't help but giggle. I laughed along with them. After the laughter died down, we resumed our lunch. Bill continued his light-hearted mocking. "I sincerely want to thank you, Carson. Wilson might have gravely damaged the ranch's finances. You are worth every penny." We all had another round of laughter. 3 days later, Bill received word that he could retrieve his livestock. We loaded 3 horses into a trailer and traveled to Wilson's Flying Doll Ranch with a sheriff's escort. Colleen came along to drive the truck and trailer back after we unloaded the horses. Bill, Sam and I began pushing the cows back to his ranch. As we approached the Rocking Bee Ranch, I rode ahead and loosened a portion of the fence line, allowing the cattle to cross. After verifying that all of the cattle were back where they belonged, we secured the fencing and rode back to the main house, pleased with our day's labor. During this period, Caitlin applied for her veterinarian license. Because the licensing process generally took around 45 days, she could only care for the animals on her father's property for the time being. I'd see her throughout the property and, of course, around dinner. Despite her continued silence, if I managed to catch her eye, I'd give her a huge grin and wiggle my brows, which would always make her blush. 2 weeks after the waterfall event, we found ourselves in the barn together and I inquired, "Have you been swimming lately?" She approached just inches away and glared at me. "Why are you such an **** hole?" I shrugged, grinned and asked, "Why are you such a *********"? Her right hand aimed for my face, but I moved quickly, seizing her wrist before she could strike. Undeterred, she attempted with her left, but I caught it as well. I pushed both hands behind her back, trapping them and pressing her body against mine. I slowly dropped my face toward hers. She stared at me, making no attempt to break away. I continued. "If you were mine, I'd put you over my knee and spank your butt." She attempted to back away, saying, "You wouldn't dare." I loosened my grip and she went backward, resting on her buttocks. "I'm not saying I wouldn't dare, I just got rid of one woman who doesn't care about me, and I'm not going to waste my time with another one." Normally she was the one to storm out, but this time, it was my turn. I left the barn and left her sitting on the ground. I didn't see her again till supper. She didn't say anything to me, as expected, but the look she gave me was incomprehensible. Not that I ever claimed to understand women. My marriage to Janice showed this. The next day, I was in the barn caring for the stalls when Bill entered. Knowing it was his day off on Sunday, I assumed he wanted to talk. I wondered whether Caitlin had told him about the previous day's episode, and if he had come to urge me to leave. I paused my work as he approached. He continued. I heard you and Caitlin had a little showdown yesterday. That addressed my query about whether Caitlin confided in her father, but I observed a twinkle in his eyes. Well, I suppose you could say that. Probably my fault, I said. He went on to say, maybe not. I believe her problem is that she doesn't know what to make of you. She believed you were here for something, but you ended up being the hero who saved her and the property. What she can't understand is why you aren't pursuing her like the other local young men. Caitlin, like her mother at her age, is used to having boys wrapped around her little finger. She's had several boyfriends, but none of them lasted. I don't believe she truly respected them. I hope you don't let her chase you away. In my opinion, you are welcome to stay here for as long as you wish. I said, thank you, Bill. That means a lot to me. As for Caitlin, I'll stop taunting her, and perhaps we can live and let live. He exited the barn, and I resumed my job. I had the rest of the day to think over Bill's statements. If Caitlin wanted to understand me, she should act civilly and engage in conversation rather than her current approach. Pursuing her like the others was simply not an option. She did not join us for supper that night, a topic no one brought up, and I did not investigate. The next day, I stuck to my schedule, waking up at 5 a.m., despite the fact that it was my day off. After breakfast, Sam and Bill left for work, and I went to get my laundry. Bill had invested in a large commercial washer and dryer, which allowed me to wash all of my clothes in one load. The laundry room was next to the kitchen, so I ate and talked with Colleen at the kitchen table while my clothes were being washed. Caitlin entered, which was unusual for breakfast as she generally ate later. Colleen inquired about my plans for the day and I informed her that I was thinking of traveling into town. I then inquired if she wanted me to pick up anything for her. She suggested that if I didn't mind, I could get a few things for her. I assured her that I didn't mind at all. Just then Caitlin said, cool, I'll bike into town with you. I had planned to go to the general store for a few items and it seems like a waste of petrol for both of us to go separately. I looked up in surprise and replied, sure, I'd be happy to give you a lift. After yesterday, I didn't expect her to talk to me, let alone want to go somewhere with. I responded, I'll be leaving in about an hour and a half after my laundry is done and put away. She told me she'd be prepared. She finished preparing something to eat and sat at the table, sitting quiet as Colleen and I talked. As I stepped out of my cabin, she appeared from the back door, dressed in a turquoise sundress that complemented her red hair. It was clear she wanted me to notice her. I held the passenger side door open for her and watched as she slid into the car. We set out and for the first half of the journey, she sat peacefully, admiring the scenery. Suddenly she said, I thought you were going to kiss me yesterday. I looked at her, but she appeared to be staring out the side window, so I couldn't see her face. I responded, well, while that may not have been unpleasant, I do have a rule about not forcing unwanted affections upon unreceptive females. I noticed her head swivel around in the corner of my eye and knew she was looking at me. She sat silently, but I saw her occasional peek in my direction. We parked into the general shop and stepped inside. I needed to get a couple of new pairs of jeans and shirts, and she had a list of what her mother wanted. An hour later, we had everything loaded. I had one more stop at the hardware shop to get a few items for Bill, but it was midday and I was hungry. I suggested we stop for a bite to eat and she agreed. We parked into the same cafe where I'd originally met Bill and Colleen. We chose a table across from one other and ordered our meals. As we sat in silence, I began to wonder if I should have simply gone to the hardware shop and returned to the ranch. Just suddenly the door slid open and 3 men entered. I recognized 2 of them as the guys who had come to see Caitlin. They rushed to our table, with 2 taking seats on either side of her and a third standing behind me. They ignored me and began talking to her. I rose up and motioned for the third person to have a seat as I proceeded to the next table. When the waitress brought our meals, I motioned for her to place my dish in front of me. I ate quickly and paid no attention to the talk at Caitlin's table. I stood up after tossing some money on the table to cover our lunch. Caitlin had barely touched her lunch, yet her plate was still full. I'm going to rush to the hardware shop. I can come back by later and see if you're ready to go, I added, interrupting their chat. She pushed her plate back, stood up and said, It was nice seeing you guys again, but we have to go. The guys at the table attempted to protest, with one even offering her a lift home. She declined and accompanied me outside to my SUV. As we drove to the hardware shop, she remained in the car, looking to fume. The hushed tension remained as we drove back to the property. She turned off the highway onto the mile-long road and questioned, "Why did you do that?" "What?" I replied, unsure of what she was pointing out. "Moving to the other table," she said. "Oh, that. Well, I assumed you'd rather spend time with your buddies. Besides, I didn't want to be in the center of their battle for your attention." "You really are an *** hole," she exclaimed. I wisely chose to keep my mouth shut. I had no desire to avoid her slaps while driving. As we approached the main home, she grabbed whatever she could carry as soon as I opened the SUV's back door. I collected several more bags and followed her inside the house. As I walked in the back door, she put everything on the kitchen table without saying anything to her mother before storming out of the room. Colleen glanced at me quizzically. I shrugged and said, "I guess I'm an *** hole." Colleen laughed and stepped closer, placing her hand on my arm. "I have never seen anyone have the effect on Caitlin that you seem to have." "I guess I was born to just piss her off," I told her. "I'm not so sure about that," she said, confusing me. I returned to my cabin and stored my new clothes. I decided not to stay indoors and went to the barn to saddle a horse. Setting out, I ended up at the top of the waterfall. With the weather beautiful, I tied the horse to a tree and sat on the edge of the falls, staring down at the tranquil pool. Caitlin rode up underneath me after about a half hour, if not more. I got off her horse, not wanting to be accused of spying in case she went skinny dipping again, and flung a stone into the water, making a splash. She looked around for the source of the noise and found me. Anticipating her departure, she mounted her horse and rode up to where I was sitting. She hitched her horse next to mine and approached me. I rose up, moving a few steps away from the edge in case she intended to shove me off. "You're an *** hole," she exclaimed, stopping inches from me. "And you're still a B****, I replied. This time, I wasn't waiting for her slap. I grabbed her waist and kissed her. I quickly released her and attempted to proceed towards my horse, but she grabbed my arm and turned me back around. I was surprised when she reached behind my neck and drew me in for another kiss. We found ourselves in a passionate kiss again. As the passion mounted, our garments went, and we had a great time. Our breathing gradually returned to normal, and we lingered silently in each other's arms. We got dressed, mounted our horses and went back down. After stabling our mounts, she turned and headed to the main house without saying anything. In a fog, I returned to my cabin and slipped into the shower. One thing became clear. I had much deeper affections for this attractive woman than I had previously admitted to myself. I hardly had time to dress for dinner. When I entered the kitchen, Bill, Colleen and Sam were already there, but Caitlin was nowhere to be found. As we took our seats, she stepped in and chose the chair near my rather than her customary spot next to Sam. Bill and Colleen exchanged glances, and Caitlin simply smiled charmingly in response. She talked animatedly during dinner. Despite their interest, her parents did not inquire as to why their daughter was in such a good mood. After supper, Jane helped her mother clean the kitchen as Sam and I returned to our cabins. Just as I was getting comfortable between the sheets, a quiet knock on my door rang out. I opened the door, wearing only my boxers, and Caitlin crept inside, finding her way into my arms. We exchanged a sweet kiss and she led me back to my bed, joining me after taking off her clothing. Again, we made love before falling asleep in one another's arms. The sudden arrival of 5 a.m. forced me to groggily reach over and deactivate the alarm. With much reluctance, I got out of bed. I illuminated the bathroom and dressed for the day, kissing her on the head before leaving the cabin. During breakfast, I couldn't avoid Bill and Colleen's scrutinizing eyes. I wondered if they were aware of their daughter's nighttime activities. Following the dinner, I loaded the pickup for another day of fence post installation. Working alone on a ranch provided plenty of time for thought. My mind strayed to my recent past, shocked that it had only been 3 months since I left my wife. It seemed like an eternity. I reflected on the relevance of Bill, Colleen and Sam in my life. Then my thoughts turned to the lovely Caitlin and the shared experiences from the previous day. I considered the idea of discovering the love her parents embodied. At lunch, I discovered I hadn't brought my dinner. As the thought crossed my head, I heard a pickup approaching quickly. Caitlin jumped out, racing toward me with a suitcase in her hand. She threw herself at me, commencing a passionate kiss before handing me the bag. I ignored the dinner and drew her in for another passionate kiss. Although I did not lay as many fence posts that day, I did place my post in her a few times. In between our passionate times, we found time to converse. I revealed information about my prior life, including how my ex-wife had betrayed me. "I'll only leave if you tell me to," I promised her. She ultimately returned home, and I finished the day's work. She was in the kitchen when I arrived, having just showered and changed, and she had chosen the seat next to mine once more. A knock on the front door interrupted our dinner. Bill answered it and returned with the same person who had first called Caitlin. Caitlin gazed at him with an unreadable face as soon as he sat down. "I was wondering if you'd like to go for a drive," he proposed. In this region of the country, where options were limited, taking a drive was effectively a euphemism for going on a date. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think my boyfriend would like it," Caitlin said. She leaned down and kissed my cheek. Mr. Tall, dark and handsome reddened and stammered before hurrying out. With that exchange, our relationship was officially out in the open. I noticed Bill and Colleen smiling with satisfaction. One had a huge grin. We had officially formed a pair. In the days that followed, Caitlin received no further visits from local men. She made it obvious that she was unavailable. I found a way to help her with her ambitions. She was looking for a bank loan to buy equipment for her veterinarian practice. The bank was hesitant to make an unsecured loan, so the only option was for her father to pledge the ranch as security. She hesitated to question him. I advised waiting a few days. I could have a solution. I phoned my offshore bank and opened an account in the name of a bogus loan company. Caitlin completed a loan application on my computer, which I had set up to send to my email. After a few days, I notified her that her loan was accepted and that a wire transfer will be made to her account. She was overjoyed with the news, but she wondered why the loan had only a 2% yearly interest rate. I mentioned that they were a non-profit philanthropic organization that made loans to persons they believed would benefit the community. I might have just offered her the money, but I knew she was too proud to accept it. After obtaining her degree through hard effort, she was determined to achieve on her own terms. By the time her license was accepted, she had purchased a new van that had been converted into a mobile veterinarian office, equipped with all essential medical equipment. As word spread about her licensed position, local ranchers began requesting her services. Caitlin and I spent several nights together in my cabin. Although Bill and Colleen were aware, they appeared to have no objections. At 27, she was grown enough to make her own choices. It took 3 months for Wilson and his crew to stand trial. The case was rather easy. The tiniest man cooperated with the prosecution and was sentenced to 2 years probation with no prison time. Wilson's other 5 employees were sentenced to 5 years in jail each. Wilson, the mastermind behind the rustle, received the maximum 10-year sentence and a $50,000 fine. When he was transported to prison, I began an inquiry into him and his ranch, discovering that he was unmarried and had no family in the region. With all of his hands incarcerated, no one was left to administer the property. This prompted me to devise a fresh idea. However, before I could get started, I had some unfinished business to attend to. I needed to formalize my divorce. I couldn't accept Janice taking half of my money. To accomplish this, I went to my friend Jake for assistance once more. Instead of sending an email, I called and requested him to speak with Janice. I wanted him to know that I had sought out and offered a settlement in exchange for a divorce. The offer was straightforward, $50,000. If she declined, she would never hear from me again or receive any money. Initially acting innocent, she demanded to know why I had left and why I would not return. Jake disclosed that I was aware of her affair with Brandon and she intended to divorce me, bringing the charade to an end. With her game revealed, Janice, who was still working as a waitress and struggling financially, agreed to my offer. To proceed, I needed to return to Texas and hire a lawyer to prepare the divorce paperwork. Caitlin was not pleased when I informed her of my departure. I stated that I needed to end this chapter in my life and told her that I would return. She persisted in taking me and waiting for me when I returned, despite my initial plan to leave my vehicle in long-term parking at the airport. Leaving behind my SUV and most of my stuff, with the exception of what fit in one suitcase, appeared to alleviate her anxieties. I left on a Sunday, and when I arrived, Jake met me at the airport. I called Caitlin every night while I was staying with him and his family. By Friday, all of the paperwork was completed. Jake accompanied Janice to my lawyer and explained that she would receive a $10,000 check right away, with the rest $40,000 due 60 days after the divorce was finalized. She signed the paperwork, and my lawyer handed her the $10,000 payment. I never had to confront Janice. Then I realized I had personal goods in storage, including souvenirs and antiques from my parents, yearbooks and other sentimental belongings. I didn't want to return for them later, so I rented a moving van and loaded it up. Caitlin was surprised when I told her I wasn't flying back, but once I explained that I was bringing back everything significant to me, her joy rose. It took me 3 days of unrelenting driving to complete the distance. On Tuesday evening, as I arrived at the Rocking Bee Ranch, everyone greeted me enthusiastically. That night, Caitlin extended her warm greeting until early in the morning, when we finally fell asleep, fatigued. With the first part of my strategy completed, I was ready to put the rest into action. This required multiple journeys to the prison where Wilson was imprisoned. My goal was to persuade him to sell me the property. I persisted in presenting my point, despite my initial resistance. I explained that he would be imprisoned for at least 7 years, and that even if he behaved well, he would not be eligible for parole. With no one to care for his ranch, his house and buildings would surely decay, and his animals would perish without proper care in the winter. I also questioned if he would be welcome back following his conviction. Faced with the danger of ruin, he eventually accepted my offer, which gave him something to start over with upon release. The next stage was to secure money. I transferred my funds back into the nation, sure that Janice would not imperil her $40,000 by taking reckless steps. I negotiated a price of $5 million with Wilson, which was lower than the property's true value, making financing reasonably easy to obtain. I placed a $500,000 down payment and financed the remainder. Taking a month to perfect things, I kept my activities hidden from everyone except Caitlin and Bill. I mentioned to them that I had personal business with my possessions that required consideration. Although it only took 1 or 2 days out of my week, I formed a corporation and registered the land in its name. With summer finishing and fall approaching, I hired someone to harvest the hay on the property. Furthermore, I hired 4 people to reside on site and operate the ranch in the meantime. The most experienced worker was designated as interim foreman. I stressed that, despite my close proximity, I would be an absentee owner for some time. I assured him that he could always reach me via phone, and that I intended to visit the ranch frequently. My final concept included remodeling the main house, which was a 2-story 5-bedroom structure that needed to be modernized. Despite Caitlin's unhappiness with my opacity regarding my activities, our relationship thrived. Every day my feelings for her became stronger, and I sensed that she felt the same way about me. Meanwhile, her veterinary practice grew, requiring her to travel frequently, but she remained pleased and happy. I almost told her what I was doing. When she returned after checking on the remodeling, she surrounded me with questions. "What the hell's going on, Carson? Are you seeing anyone else?" I said, "God, no. I swear there's no one else. I only have a few things to get done. Please believe me. I promise to tell you everything soon. I'm asking you to trust me." She examined my face, looking for the truth, and said, "Okay, Carson. I do trust you, but you better tell me what's going on soon, or I'm going to kick your ass." I grabbed her and kissed her with all my affection. As spring arrived and the calving season began, the main house renovation was finished. It was time to carry out the final component of my strategy. One afternoon, when I had Caitlin alone, I asked her to go for a drive. "I've been thinking it's time for me to leave the Rocking Bee Ranch," I told the girl. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she replied, "But I promised I wouldn't leave." I had scheduled it so that we would arrive at the former Flying Doll Ranch entrance. I turned in and began driving down the quiet road. "I wasn't really planning on going far," I informed him. She looked about, bewildered. I was not sure if she had heard what I said. Then she said, "What are we doing on Wilson's land?" I waited until we were at the main home before responding. I invited her to come on, as I wanted to show her something. I got out of the truck and walked around to open her door. Taking her hand, I took her to the front door and opened it. She inquired again, "What the heck are you doing? We could be in danger for this." I encouraged her to relax, that Wilson no longer owned the ranch and that we should take a look around. I wanted to know what she thought about the house. I brought her upstairs, then we walked through the bedrooms and back down. There was a huge living room, a finely paneled den, 2 rooms used as home offices, and finally the kitchen. Her expression indicated that she adored the new kitchen. There was only 1 room with furnishings, which I wanted to use as my office. The rest of the house awaited her judgment on how to furnish it. I asked her what she thought of the house, and she responded it was really good. When I asked if she believed she could live there, she said, "What the hell?" I could see she was puzzled and upset. I fell on one knee and reached into my jacket pocket. I stated to her, "Wilson no longer owns the ranch, I do, and I'm asking if you could live there as my wife." She asked in a startled tone if I owned the house, and I nodded enthusiastically. She cried, "Yes!" I then removed the engagement ring from my pocket, held it up and proposed to her. Her face screwed up and her eyes welled with tears. I believed I had made a mistake until she tackled me to my back and kissed my face. She then offered me her fingers so that I could place the ring on her. She surveyed the place with fresh eyes, running from room to room and inspecting everything. I waited anxiously for her to come running back into my arms. "The house is gorgeous. I love it," she exclaimed eagerly. I escorted her across the room to 2 doors that went into a hallway. "There are 2 offices, one for you to run your business from and one for me," I explained, earning me another long kiss. I walked her into the office with the desk and took out a large sheet of paper. It depicted a property gate and said, "Double C Ranch." She took a look at it and wondered what the double C indicated. I informed her that it stands for Carson and Caitlin Ranch. She cried and began tugging at my clothes, and I joined in stripping her naked. I set her on top of the desk and dedicated the workplace to her love. In fact, in the days ahead, we made love in every room of our new home. After we had recovered and dressed, I informed her it was time to inform her parents. She was so delighted I believe she floated out to the truck. We returned a few minutes after 6 and Bill, Colleen and Sam were already in the kitchen preparing supper. When we stepped in, Caitlin lifted out her left hand and squealed, "We're getting married!" Colleen sprang up and raced over to hug her kid, while Bill and Sam approached and pumped my hand and stroked my back. My future mother-in-law then grabbed me tightly, while Caitlin hugged her father and Sam. When everything settled down, we all sat down to eat. Caitlin waited until everyone had eaten. "Of course, this means we will be moving," she stated as casually as possible. "What?" shouted Bill, Colleen and Sam together. She stared at me and urged me to tell them, so I responded, "Well, Bill, you remember how Wilson wanted to combine his ranch with yours? I was thinking it may be a good idea." Bill got up, enraged, and exclaimed, "There's no way in hell the flying doll is going to get his ranch." I smiled and told him to relax. It was no longer the flying doll, but the Double C Ranch, and the new owners were sitting at his table right now. In confusion, he inquired, "What are you talking about?" I informed him I had bought out Wilson and that the ranch now belonged to Caitlin and me, Double C, Carson, and Caitlin. Colleen claimed she received it immediately away. I answered, "Bill, I thought we could run the 2 ranches together. We'd split the profits 50-50ths. He continued, "But the Double C Ranch is over twice the size of my ranch, and it brings in a lot more profit." I said, "You've done this your entire life, I need your assistance. I'd like us to be equal partners. You'd be in command of the operations and anything you say goes. Besides, it's also part of Caitlin's property. It will be keeping everything inside the family." He sat down and gazed at Colleen. She nodded her head. He shook hands with me across the table. "Damn it, Carson. This is going to take some getting used to, but I accept your offer." I explained, "This means we'll have additional hands to oversee and Sam will be the head foreman. And now I get to remove all of those fence posts I worked so hard to install on that side of the property." Everybody laughed at me. That night's supper was a noisy celebration. Caitlin spent the night in my cabin and exhausted me. We arrived late for breakfast the next morning, but no one had left the kitchen. They were waiting for us to eat so that we could all go over to the Double C Ranch, where Caitlin could show off our new home. Everyone was impressed, and I noticed Colleen looking enviously at the restored kitchen. Caitlin and her mother spent a month furnishing the house. It was ready to move in on our wedding night. We were married at the Double C Ranch. Bill and his family were respected and well-liked, and ranchers and their families from all over came to celebrate the occasion. As Caitlin's spouse, Bill's son-in-law, and the new owner of Double C Ranch, I was welcomed into their community. We finally made it to bed later that night and stayed there for the majority of the next day, making love. We would still be there, but on the 3rd day of our marriage, I brought my bride to Fiji for a tropical honeymoon. Our first roundup that year was a success, as we sold a large number of cattle for a profit. A substantial amount went into repaying the debt, but with Caitlin's business, we were able to make a good living. We even bought Sam a wonderful new house, and he now has a girlfriend around his age who lives in town. We may have another wedding soon. Another year has passed and my lovely wife has just told me the most wonderful news. She is pregnant. We are going to have a baby. One last word before I leave. I know some may argue that I should have learned my lesson the first time and had Caitlin sign a prenuptial agreement. If that's the case, you really haven't met my Caitlin. She is not Janice. She works hard at her profession and cares for our home. She is her mother's daughter, and she expresses her affection to me every day. With only me. Every day I look into her blue Irish eyes and see that love. I'm 30F, wed to Brian, 32M, a really great man. At least until lately, our 7 years together have been peaceful. We have been married for 5 and life has been lovely. My family has always been somewhat complicated. When I was 10 years old, my parents split. My mother fled and since then we have not spoken at all. When I was 15, my dad, 55M, drew Diane, 50F. She entered the family with her 28F daughter Melissa. Mostly since Melissa was constantly envious of me, we were never close. She simply made matters worse as she disliked my wonderful relationship with my dad, who has always preferred me. Melissa has always shown a little entitlement and spoiling. Diane cuddles her. She has always sided with Melissa no matter how often there has been dispute or argument. Although my dad attempts to remain impartial, it is clear he is closer to me and has caused many issues over the years. Melissa appears to be carrying this chip on her shoulder on the way our dad treats us differently. To complicate matters, Diane and my dad's son Peter, 14M, is my half-brother. Though the family relationships are equally complex, he is a wonderful child. Though Melissa is an adult now and should be able to manage things better, her dad loves him too and Melissa always feels that she has been pushed to the side. Still, I am a successful business owner, which has simply accentuated the distance separating Melissa from me. She has always been jealous of my connection with our dad and my job. She is a low-level marketing assistant who regularly laments how unfair life is, how she does not have the same chances, etc. I have tried to be encouraging, but it is difficult when she is constantly negative and seeks means of dragging me down. She recently began dating James, 35M, a decent-looking man, but now I'm doubting everything. Even from our early years, Melissa and I never truly got along. Though I suppose it's not unusual for step-siblings to experience some conflict, ours felt to be on a different level. Melissa obviously objected to me from the beginning because of the relationship I had with our dad. She always considered me as competition, hence it was aggravating as I actually wanted a sisterly relationship with her. But it became abundantly evident over time that this was not going to happen. The favoritism of my dad proved unhelpful. He has never hesitated to share with anyone who would listen. He has always been pleased with my successes. Melissa, on the other hand, seemed to be more of a letdown in his eyes, which widened our gulf. Every time something went wrong in her life, she would find a way to point the finger at me or say I had it simpler since our dad loved me more. To be very honest, it was draining. And Diane? No matter what, Melissa's constant cheerleader has been her. Diane would defend Melissa even if she obviously made mistakes. Diane and my dad have had a lot of conflict as well, but he has never been one to squarely face it. To my annoyance, he simply aims to maintain peace, which sometimes means allowing things to lapse. Melissa's jealousy evolved over years into something more poisonous. She usually attempts to minimize my achievements as she has never been happy about any of them. She hardly noticed it when I married Brian and focused entirely on how unfair it was and how alone she was. She laughed at my company when I first started it, stating I only got where I am due to our dad's support. She seems unable to accept my success or happiness, which makes any type of meaningful connection unattainable for us. Notwithstanding all this, I have attempted to keep the peace. I try to include her in activities, hoping it would strengthen our relationship. I do not go out of my way to rub her triumphs in her face. Still, it's never enough. She finds a means to turn whatever I do into something negative no matter what. Since I desire things could be different, it's draining and truly upsetting. My battle with infertility has been among the most agonizing events in my life. Brian and I resolved 3 years ago that we were ready to begin a family. Though our enthusiasm and optimism were high, things didn't go as expected. We visited a reproductive doctor following a year of trying without success, and there we received the news that I have a disorder severely impairing spontaneous conception. Nothing worked, medications, therapies, even IVF that we tried. Every failed effort felt like a kick to the belly and severely affected both of us emotionally. Particularly since we had always imagined a large family, we were heartbroken. Our relationship has suffered much from it. There were times when I felt totally hopeless and the tension and disappointment were intolerable. Melissa's family is among those who know about our hardships. They were all really encouraging. Though he has never been very good with emotional matters, my dad attempted to be there for me in his own manner. Diane offered to assist with all we needed and was more involved. Melissa first appeared to be empathetic, but that was fleeting. She began making tiny digs and remarks with great depth not long ago. She once asked me casually how fortunate I was to be able to concentrate on my profession free from child responsibility. Especially from someone who understood how much I wanted to be a mother. It burned so badly. She seemed to be enjoying my suffering, which more than I could express hurts. Dealing with infertility is difficult enough without someone in your own family rubbing slaves in the wound. Almost as if she were mocking me, Melissa would also mention her own aspirations for children one day. She would discuss how simple she would find it when the time came. How she would have no trouble getting pregnant, and how she was in no hurry as she had all the time in the world. Knowing what I was going through, I couldn't understand why she would say such things. Which were terrible. To be honest, Melissa has always been rather the drama queen. She is single, a low-level marketing assistant, and she regularly grumbles about how her life has not turned out the way she intended. She has always been the kind of person that seeks attention, even if it means blatantly falsifying stories or exaggerating to get it. I can't count the times she has pretended to be unwell. Only the next day when something exciting comes up she suddenly recovers. She recently began seeing James, 35M, and initially I thought it would be great for her. Exactly what Melissa needs: kind, successful, grounded. He seemed to be a decent man. But as their relationship developed, I began to see some warning signals. Melissa has been pushing James to relocate more quickly than he is comfortable with. First of all, given her past of wanting things for the wrong reasons, her discussion of marriage and children after just a few months of dating seems a tad hurried. Melissa has always had a great need to stay up with me, more like to surpass me. She seems to be unhappy only until she feels as though she is one-upping me in some form. Whether it's with our professions, our relationships, or now considering a family, I have seen it time and time again. It's draining. At one point I'm not sure what more I could do to maintain calm. She has also been known to embellish events seeking compassion. She would make up stories about how harsh her professors were or pretend to have injuries to get out of gym class when she was younger. It's always something, and today it looks like that behavior has persisted into her adult life. She talks endlessly about how demanding her work is, how she feels underappreciated, and how everyone is out to get her. Particularly when you know someone is not being really honest, it can be difficult to sympathize with someone who is constantly acting the victim. James strikes me as a fine man, but I worry about him becoming sucked into Melissa's web. Unlike us, he doesn't know her, hence I worry he could not see the warning signals until it's too late. Still, I'm not very inclined to meddle at the same time. I simply hope things don't spiral out of hand for Melissa's sake as much as for his. Imagine yourself last weekend. Fast forward. Celebrating our 5th wedding anniversary, Brian and I also had an opportunity to let others know my company is growing. We agreed to have a large dinner party inviting close relatives, friends, and some business contacts. Particularly considering all Brian and I have gone through lately, I wanted tonight to be memorable. I spent weeks organizing every element, selecting the ideal cuisine, contracting a professional catering company, and even installing some subdued CCTV cameras for security needs. We just had a couple break-ins in the area, hence I wanted not to take any chances. Everything was supposed to be flawless, and I was eager to tell everyone we know our great news. My parents, Diane, Melissa, Peter, and a handful of our closest friends and business colleagues were on the guest list. Given our past, I was a little dubious about inviting Melissa, but I decided it was the proper thing to do. Moreover, I considered perhaps this would be a chance for us to at last get along, even for one evening. The day the party was scheduled arrived, and I wanted things to go without a hitch so everyone might enjoy themselves. Together, Brian and I checked to ensure every element was flawless. The caterers came early, and we laid a lovely table including candles and flowers. I even bought some pricey wine knowing our visitors would enjoy it. Everyone arriving felt as though all the effort had paid off. Starting with champagne and appetizers, we kicked things off and generally everyone seemed to be having fun. Melissa was also being quite friendly, which I interpreted as encouraging. Thinking perhaps, just maybe, Things were looking good. I began to unwind and really appreciate the evening. Until dessert, everything was running perfectly. The caterers presented a beautiful cake, and we were about to make our major business expansion news when Melissa abruptly got up. She blurted out that she had some news of her own instead of the toast or anything I had assumed she would bring. Glancing around the room with this haughtiness, she declared, "I'm pregnant, 3 months along. I pledge you could have heard a pin drop." Everyone, including her boyfriend James, who seemed totally blindsided, was shocked. He glanced at her as though he cannot believe what he was hearing. The range of feelings I experienced at that moment, shock, hurt, anger, all of which struck me simultaneously, is difficult for me to even start to explain. Though I have always wanted to make that kind of announcement myself, given all Brian and I have gone through with infertility, I realized that time might never happen. And here was Melissa, grabbing our evening to deliver her bombshell, knowing of my difficulties. Some of our visitors had pitying stares, and that made me wish to vanish. Still, I kept my cool rather than setting out a scene. Though I was dying within, I smiled broadly and complimented her. Although Brian's hand under the table allowed me to relax, I knew he was equally unhappy as I was. Originally scheduled this evening to honor our successes, today it became a celebration of Melissa's pregnancy. I said my congrats, then excused myself and vanished to the bathroom to cool off. I needed 1 minute to collect my ideas and stop the tears from flowing. She stole it entirely from us. It was meant to be our night. Given what we have gone through, I found it incomprehensible why she would act so carelessly. Still, this was Melissa, always seeking to be the center of attention, regardless of cost. Brian and I were still contemplating what had transpired early the next morning. We tried to concentrate on the positives, that is, the nice comments from our friends and the way the business news had been received. But it was difficult to move past the hurt and irritation. Though I hadn't expected to hear from Melissa very soon, there was a loud bang at the door as we were seated for breakfast. When I opened it, Melissa was standing there glaringly angry. Hurrying into the living room, she passed me without waiting. She started a frenzy before I could ask what was going on, charging me for spiking the food at the party to make her sick. She insisted she had been throwing up all night and morning and felt I had done something out of jealousy over her pregnancy. I was totally surprised. Spiking the food? What I was listening to astounded me. She was told that was absurd, that we had professionally catered meals, and that there was no way anything could have been changed. She wouldn't pay attention though. She said that I had to have done something and insisted on seeing the party CCTV footage to clear my name. Melissa was not having it when Brian entered the room trying to cool her down. She was yelling, screaming all kinds of crazy charges, and really I had no idea what to say. That she would even consider me capable of something so sinister infuriated and wounded me. The whole matter is becoming rapidly more dangerous. Should I fail to present Melissa the tape right then and there, Melissa threatened to call the police and press charges. She was behaving totally illogically, and I had no idea what to do. Though another part of me wanted to show her the film merely to shut her down and establish I had done nothing wrong, part of me wanted to throw her out of the house. She wasn't having it when Brian tried to reason with her, saying that perhaps she was simply suffering morning sickness. Nothing we said would make her change her mind. She was sure I had done anything to compromise her pregnancy. Just wanted it to stop. I felt as though I was in some kind of twisted dream. A few more minutes of yelling and accusations later, I at last consented to show her the CCTV film. I thought that was the only approach to persuade her to cool off and leave our peace intact. I called up the recordings from the previous evening and Brian and I guided her to the room housing the film. I kept looking at Melissa as we watched the video, expecting for her to see how ludicrous her charges were. The film captured everything: guests arriving, supper being presented and everyone having fun. Nothing out of the usual, no odd behavior, and most definitely no proof I had touched the food. Melissa doubled down nevertheless, instead of retreating. She began dissecting every minute detail in the video, alleging that certain attendees appeared uneasy or that perhaps the caterers had done at my request was wrong. She was clearly not going to let this go. She was grabbing at straws. She then turned to me out of nowhere and declared, if I didn't confess to what I'd done, she would take this to the next level. She was discussing urgent charges, visiting law enforcement and even suing me for what she claimed to have been an attempt to damage her unborn child. Never had I seen her like this before. So enraged, so resolved to have me the villain in her narrative. When Brian tried to step in once more, implying that Melissa might be simply overwhelmed with all that was happening in her life, she was not having it. She was dead focused on having me pay for something I had not even done. I didn't understand why she seemed to be on a mission to ruin me. I became stuck. She would assume I was hiding something if I hadn't shown her the footage, but even with it, she wasn't happy. I had no idea what else I could do to prove my innocence, and the idea of her dragging this out in front of courts or the police horrified me. I simply wanted the whole thing to stop. I was totally lost. I'm thus left wondering, Reddit, how I should address this. Should I keep trying to reason with Melissa, or should I enable her to forward with her threats and handle the consequences? All of this baffles and hurts me greatly. I have no idea what to do. Update 1. Hey Reddit, thanks for the guidance and encouragement. Things have turned wild, and I have to tell what happened next. I chose to attentively check the CCTV footage following Melissa's tantrum to be sure I had not missed anything. Though I expected nothing, I was driven to clear my name and put this entire disaster behind me. Something struck my eye as I was viewing the footage. James, Melissa's boyfriend, stood close to the drink table during the party. It was delicate, but when Melissa turned away, I saw him slide something into her drink. What the fuck was happening? Several times I watched the video to be sure I wasn't seeing things, but it was obvious. James had clearly placed something in her drink. I started to shock. What had he done? Explain why. Though I knew I had to face him about it, I also realized this would cause even more upheaval. I requested James to visit when I phoned him. Though he sounded tense, he agreed. I wasted no time when he got here. Showing him the video, I insisted on an explanation. At first he tried to deny it. But when he realized there was no going around it, he finally admitted. James owned up to having tainted Melissa's drink with Plan B. She had been pressuring him to have a baby, he said, and he wasn't ready for that kind of dedication. Melissa reportedly had been lying to him about using birth control and he freaked out upon learning of it. In a flash of fear, he dropped the pill into her drink, trying to stop the pregnancy without facing her squarely. I said nothing at all. Her boyfriend drugged her to stop her from becoming pregnant. For actual? James confessed, and I had no idea what to do going forward. Furious, outraged, and even a little afraid of what this would imply for all the people involved. Though I knew it would destroy Melissa, I realized I couldn't keep this to myself. She deserved the truth. I urged Melissa to come over when I phoned her. She was still furious when she got there, most likely anticipating another argument about the meal. But her face went white when I told her what James had done. She first just stared shocked at me without saying anything. She first tried to dispute it, claiming I must have somehow edited the recording, when I showed her the video. But the data was clearly there, and finally she had to confront reality. She moved from denial to rage when it sank her at last. She began yelling at James, calling him every name found in a book. She was tossing stuff and blaming him for destroying her life, so it was a full-fledged tantrum. Then in the middle of her tirade, she blurted out something even more startling. She acknowledged her lying about her pregnancy. Fearful James was about to leave, she claimed she made up the pregnancy to try to trap him back into her house. She reasoned that he would have to commit totally if he thought she was expecting his child. I stood absolutely stunned. Here I was believing she was really pregnant and that she had told me at my party out of some sick craving for attention, but it was all a lie, a hopeless, pitiful attempt to control James. And now her lie had exploded in front of her in the worst conceivable manner. Then Melissa turned on me and started accusing me of destroying everything. She said she could have maintained the lie and things would have been better if I hadn't shown her the video. It still astounded me. Even after all she had done, she was still working to twist events to make me the bad guy. My dad and Diane arrived in the thick of this turmoil as if things couldn't get bad. Melissa apparently had called them on her way over, screaming about how I was out to get her, so they came over to cool things up. Still, they strolled in exactly as Melissa was heading off on James. Things were anarchy. Diane launched Melissa's defense right away, asking what I had done to irritate her daughter. Diane would not hear me trying to explain everything. James spiking the drink. Melissa lying about the pregnancy. Saying I had always been jealous and was only searching for a means to destroy Melissa's life, she accused me of setting her up. My dad, on the other hand, first said nothing. After seeing the tape and listening to James, he turned to Melissa with an expression I had never seen before. Not even does disappointment start to cover it. She had done, lying about something as significant as a pregnancy, controlling everyone around her, and then turning on me for revealing the truth, something he couldn't believe. My dad backed me in a dispute with Melissa for the first time. He advised her to accept accountability for her behavior as what she did was unacceptable. Of course, Melissa did not respond particularly well. She began to cry, claiming that she is always the one blamed while I am treated like the golden kid and that no one else ever supports her. Diane took great offense at my dad for not standing up for Melissa. She charged him with deserting their family and enabling me to turn him against them. With Melissa screaming in the background, the whole event descended into a protracted quarrel between my dad and Diane. It was a horrible catastrophe. All I wanted was everyone to go. They finally did. Melissa was still sobbing and Diane glared at me like I was the devil when my dad advised Melissa and Diane to head home and cool off. I was utterly exhausted. All I wanted was a decent anniversary party and business news, and suddenly this catastrophe had my family in disarray. Right now I'm at a complete loss, hence I could really appreciate some guidance on how to handle this. Update 2. Good Reddit, I'm back offering more updates. Since that turbulent day, things have become convoluted, and I am still trying to make sense of it all. Word got around among our relatives and friends once the dust settled from the major disclosure on James spiking Melissa's drink. Though you know how these things go, people talk, I did not want it. Concerned about the situation, business associates and a few close friends contacted me. While some were encouraging, others seemed concerned about how this mistake may damage my company's standing. Given something as serious as accusations of spiking cocktails and lying about a pregnancy, I suppose that makes sense. No one wants to be connected with scandal. Though within I was slightly panicking, I told them everything was under control. Having this drama leak into my work life is the last thing I need. Regarding Melissa, her standing has suffered greatly. Those who attended the party, especially those who personally heard her announcement, are now challenging all she says. She has been avoiding social media, which is unusual for her. Some of her shared acquaintances have also distanced themselves. She enjoys the attention normally, but right now it seems as though she is hiding. Regarding family dynamics, things have become even more convoluted. James split from Melissa soon after everything became clear. Unable to handle the aftermath, he was naturally enraged over being controlled. Naturally, Melissa blames me for the breakup. She says they would still be together if I hadn't showed her the film. Classic Melissa, dodging accountability instead of assigning guilt. About the whole thing, my dad is truly conflicted. Though Melissa's behavior calls for a soft spot for him usually, this time he seems to be questioning it. I never would have imagined him saying that, but he has been discussing severing relations with her. It has severely damaged his relationship with Diane, who is still protecting Melissa. Things between them are, at least, tense, and I worry it may cause further major problems in their marriage. Given all that has transpired, I have been giving legal action against James' great thought. Though it was under Plan B, what he did, spiking Melissa's drink, was utterly out of line. Speaking with a lawyer, they advised me that things may get complicated even though they stated I have a case should I wish to file charges. Given the whole affair has gone public, James might countersue for slander, particularly now. It's a lot to consider and I'm not sure if the extra stress is worth it. Melissa has been flitting about threats of a lawsuit against me for emotional suffering at the same time. She is claiming great mental trauma from my showing of the CCTV footage and revealing of her lies. Although it's ridiculous, the attorney encouraged me to treat it seriously should she choose to act. If it comes to a countersuit, we are looking at possibilities. But to be honest, the thought of attending court over this makes me ill. I simply want this dream to fade. To aggravate things, Diane is entirely on Melissa's side. Just ridiculous is her insistence on my dad acting legally against me. Though it's driving a gulf between him and Diane, my dad is happily not entertained by that thought. More frequently staying at our house, he is trying to avoid the stress at home. Though I hate to see him trapped in the middle, I have no idea how to correct it. I am currently attempting to concentrate on safeguarding my company and myself. Just in case things get more intense, I have added more security devices at home and at the office. I have also begun recording everything, every contact, every threat. So I have evidence should this go before court. Although it seems overkill, I would much prefer to be safe than regret. Edit 1. To try to save what remains of our family, my dad advised family therapy. He is eager to mend things with Diane and, I believe, still harboring hope that we may somehow mend our connection with Melissa. Though I realized how much the concept meant to him, I wasn't excited about it. I consented nevertheless. Diane grudgingly consented as well, although Melissa first flatly objected. She finally agreed to one session, simply to hear everyone out, after some persuasion though. The session turned out clearly as a fiasco. The therapist tried to mediate, but Melissa was antagonistic from the time we arrived. She spent much of the time portraying the victim, blaming me for destroying her life and asserting that I had always been envious of her. She maintained that James and her would be happy and planning their future together if I hadn't intervened. It was all about how I had exposed her and about how unfair it was that she was the one suffering as a result. Diane was not improved either. She blamed me for boiling the pot and generating all this turmoil, shielding Melissa at every turn. She even had the gall to advise me to have handled things privately and kept silent about the CCTV evidence to spare Melissa from humiliation. What I was hearing astounded me. I was supposed to simply let Melissa carry on with her lies and manipulation to keep the peace. Although my dad attempted to be impartial, he once lost his cool. Melissa was advised by him to own her behavior and cease attributing her troubles to others. Diane interpreted that as a betrayal, and the two of them descended into a shouting war. The therapist sought control, but it was too late. Melissa bolted, screaming that she was done with all of us, and Diane trailed her out. My dad was seated there looking disappointed at the end of the session. He said he didn't know what else to do and that perhaps it was time to realize things wouldn't get better. He apologized to me. Seeing him so distraught broke my heart and made me understand that this could be beyond save. For Melissa, things have only gotten worse following the catastrophic therapy session. She lost her job, according to what I heard via common friends. She seems to have had unpredictable behavior, missing work or arriving late. At last her manager had enough and let her leave. Though I'm not surprised, it is nevertheless depressing to see her descend this way. She has also been disseminating online rumors about me. She has been tweeting accusing me of ruining her life and turning our family against her. She even made ludicrous hints suggesting I edited the footage to make James seem bad. Although most people who know the whole truth are not purchasing it, some seem to be devouring it. It hurts, and it makes me wonder whether I should have kept things private even though I know that would have only served to hasten the unavoidable. My dad is bordering on insane with concern. Melissa has not responded when he tried getting in touch. Naturally upset with him for not supporting Melissa more, Diane blames him for driving her away. Their marriage might not survive this. Things between them are precariously hanging. Diane's hard set against my dad's even talking about stopping Melissa's financial support, expecting it will drive her to get her life together. I am at the very end of it. Though it's not that easy, I have thought about totally severing relations to Melissa. She is still family, and despite all, I find myself thinking about her always. I cannot, however, continue to let her pull everyone else down. I have begun researching legal choices to guard against the falsehoods she is disseminating online. Though my attorney is counseled to write a cease and desist letter, I am unsure. Though I can't allow her to keep lying about me, I also don't want to let things get much more escalated. Update 3. 6 months later. Hey Reddit. After everything fell apart 6 months ago, I at last have some excellent news to report. Following all the tension, turmoil, and emotional roller coasters, something wonderful happened. I discovered I'm pregnant. And it occurred organically, against all chances, not through IVF or any other procedure. Though Brian and I are over the moon, given everything that has transpired with Melissa, we have been careful about who we inform. We agreed to keep it under wraps until I reached into my second trimester. We at last had something to celebrate after years of heartache and disappointment, but concurrently we harbored an underlying anxiety about Melissa's reaction should she find out. Since the whole episode with James, she has been out of control. The last thing we wanted was for her to find a means of ruining this for us too. We have kept the pregnancy under wraps, only informing a small number of close friends and intimate relatives. When we told Dad, he was overjoyed and has been quite helpful. Diane, on the other hand, responded somewhat inconsistently. She seemed a little aloof as well as pleased for us. She still finds it difficult to deal with everything that transpired with Melissa, so it is influencing her attitude to my news. Though there is conflict, Brian and I are emphasizing the good. We have begun organizing the nursery and creating baby arrival plans. At last, being in this place after all we have gone through relieves us. Though I'm trying to be hopeful, I can't say the anxiety of anything going wrong has totally vanished. We knew it would be difficult as we neared the time to tell the rest of the family about the pregnancy. We made a conscious choice not to invite Melissa, even though we wanted to arrange a small private party with just our closest family members, my dad, Diane, Peter, and some friends. We felt leaving her out of it was safer and less taxing after all that had transpired. The day of the conference arrived and I felt both anxious and thrilled. After everyone had finished our modest supper, Brian and I got up to make our announcement. As I told everyone the news, my heart was pounding, But the response was just what we could have asked for. Peter was delighted at the prospect of being an uncle, while my dad was ecstatic and leaped to hug us both. Though I could see she was holding back a little, even Diane grinned and congratulated us despite her recent distancing. Diane inquired whether we had told Melissa, and there was a period of awkwardness following the initial enthusiasm. Everyone in the room was clearly tense waiting for my response. We hadn't told her yet, I said, and with everything that has transpired, we weren't sure how to approach it. Diane appeared torn while my dad nodded in comprehension. She pulled back, most likely thinking it wasn't the proper time, even though I wanted her to offer Melissa over. With everyone toasting to the new family addition, we ended the evening on a positive note. It seemed like a turning point, as though perhaps we were at last past all the drama and suffering. The news got out the following day. Although we hadn't yet put anything on social media, in our family word of mouth travels quickly. Not long after, I began receiving texts from friends and relatives all wishing well. I knew it was just a matter of time before Melissa found out, even as I was savoring the optimism and trying to keep focused on the happiness of the moment. Later on that evening, sure enough, my dad called. He seemed tense and mentioned Melissa had learned about the pregnancy through common connections. She was enraged, he said, outraged that we hadn't informed her straight and that she had to learn through someone else. He cautioned me that she might show up at our place. He was right. Melissa showed up at our house that very night, exactly as my dad had cautioned. As Brian and I were relaxing from the day and savoring a quiet moment together, we heard pounding on the front door. I recognized it even before I unlocked the door. Melissa looked angry, almost unhinged as I let her in. She launched her tirade without wasting any time. She stated it was obvious I was trying to eradicate her from the family and accused me of purposefully keeping her off the announcement. She continued on about how unjust it was, how she had gone through so much, and how I was rubbing my pregnancy in her face. She wasn't having any of it when I attempted to remain cool and explain that we had kept the pregnancy under wraps for a purpose and that we were going to inform her once we were ready. She persisted in saying that I had done this to pay her back off for what James had done. Sadly, she was essentially rewriting history to present herself as the victim, therefore painting a picture of nothing new. The exchange descended rapidly into a yelling match. As the baby's aunt, she insisted she had a right to be involved and asked to be a part of her life. But considering all that has happened, Brian and I had already decided to create some strict limits. We explained to her that although we wouldn't cut her off entirely, we wanted time and space to concentrate on our new family free from continual upheaval. She finally lost it entirely at that. Melissa began yelling that we were isolating her, that we were attempting to take away the only family she had left, and that she would make our lives terrible if we allowed her to participate. Brian intervened, reminding her she should go and that should she keep threatening us, we would discuss obtaining a restraining order. She hurled herself and slammed the door behind her. Having to threaten legal action against my own stepsister merely to preserve the peace in my family astounded me. Melissa's reaction made Brian and I realize we had to make some difficult choices. We filled my dad in on what had transpired when we spoke. Though I could see he was very depressed by the whole situation, he was not surprised. Although he has always strived to keep the family together, he also acknowledged that this time things had gone too far. My dad totally approved of our choice to impose limits on Melissa. He even advised us to think about temporarily cutting off our interaction with her until she receives the care she obviously requires. Diane, though, told a different tale. She contacted me, obviously disturbed when she learned what had transpired. Saying Melissa was only going through a difficult period and that cutting her off would only make things worse, she begged me to rethink. Diane didn't seem to get my explanation, that we were merely establishing limits for our own sanity rather than cutting her off entirely. She insisted that families should stick together no matter what, but I believe she is in denial about the harm Melissa's behavior has caused. Ultimately, Brian and I agreed to carry out our strategy. Melissa is only involved in our life when absolutely required. We are keeping minimum touch with her. At our house, we have also added more security devices in case she attempts another wild pull-off. Though I wanted things to be, I have to give my expanding family's safety and well-being top priority. Regarding my dad and Diane, their relationship is now considerably more tense. My dad has been spending more time away from home, lodging with friends or visiting our house. Diane is still trying to keep everything together, but I can tell the tension is wearing her down as well. Though I'm not sure what will happen with them, I hope they can sort things out without totally separating themselves. Right now, I'm mostly concentrating on my pregnancy and getting ready for our baby to arrive. Though it's difficult when it feels like everything is precariously balanced, I'm trying to remain upbeat and keep the drama at a distance. I simply want to savor this period without thinking about the next family catastrophe just waiting around. Update 4. 1 year later. Hey Reddit. It's been a year since my previous update, and I'm glad life has turned around much needed. Few months back, Brian and I welcomed a healthy baby daughter into the world. Emily is absolutely flawless, we called her. Given all the tension I had during my pregnancy, it was great relief when the birth went well and Emily and I were both healthy. Brian has been a really outstanding parent. He is hands-on with everything from late-night feeds to diaper changes and utterly smitten with Emily. It has deepened our relationship even more, and I would most want to have him at my side. About the rest of the family, things have been challenging but under control. With the continuous drama involving Melissa and Diane, my dad has been a loving grandpa visiting our house practically daily to see Emily. Diane has been trying to be more involved, to her credit. She's been trying to be a good grandma, and I'm trying to meet her halfway to help to keep the peace even if there is still some friction between us. Turning to Melissa's issue. Following the conflict a year ago, we stayed away as scheduled. Melissa first found it difficult. She kept snapping out on social media and made a few more attempts to get up unannounced. But some months ago something changed. Unbelievably, Diane persuaded Melissa to begin treatment. Though I had low expectations from it, Melissa seems to be at last making some development. My dad claims Melissa has been routinely attending treatment and has even begun to admit some of her prior actions. She contacted me a few weeks ago to really apologize rather than to assign blame or accusations. Though it was a brief note, it seemed honest. She said she was working on herself and realized she had been acting out of envy and hurt. She stated she hoped we might have a relationship eventually, even if it would take time, not asking for forgiveness. Though I was careful to reply, finally I responded briefly thanking her for getting in touch. I told her I'm willing to restore our connection, but it would have to be slow and under my terms. She has thus so far shown respect, more than I would have expected. Melissa seems to be doing well generally and also started a new career. She's not returning to her former self, but she is displaying maturity that I really never would have expected. Though still on guard, I am gently hopeful. Though I'm not ready to let her back into my life completely and trust won't be established overnight, I'm hoping this could be the beginning of something wonderful. I suppose that is it. I appreciate all of your support and counsel throughout the past year. Though it's been an unusual road, I'm glad to have somewhere to share it all. If something noteworthy occurs, I will keep you informed. But for now I'm simply looking forward to savoring life with my small family and seeing where the future leads us. Dad gave the business to my brother-in-law instead of me at his retirement party. Now they're asking me for help after fraud charges. My father retired 2 years ago as the CEO of the lab equipment company he founded. He had assured me for nearly 7 years that I, 30M, would become the next CEO. But on the day of his retirement celebration, he announced that my brother-in-law would be the new CEO. It came as a tremendous surprise to me because I was the one who had planned the party, and I had no idea what was going to happen. I clapped along with everyone else as he delivered the announcement, but then I challenged him. He explained why he let me down. Apparently, my brother-in-law, Zach, 34M, was more of a son to him than I was, as I had disappointed him. Let me tell you that Zach had only been in the business for approximately a year, whereas I had devoted 7 years of my life to it. We had known Zach for a long time, since he and my sister, 33F, had been dating for about 5 years and married for 2. When my father retired, I worked with Zach, and he seemed like a kind guy. Still, I couldn't accept the reality that my father thought Zach was more of a son than I was. When I asked my father to expand on how I had failed him, he answered the most ridiculous thing I could think of, and I lost all respect for him. He explained that it had been a difficult decision, but he had to do what was best for the company. He said that someone as mentally weak as I was could never be a competent leader. That's why he passed me aside in favor of Zach, who he thought had more attributes in common with him. He was alluding to my diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, which I had mistakenly disclosed to my family a few months before my father retired. One night, while eating dinner with my parents, I accidentally dropped a little container of anti-anxiety medications that had been prescribed to me. I needed to explain everything to them. My mother was cool with it, but my father did not believe in the value of mental health. He thought that being tough was the answer to everything, and when I told him about my nervousness, he began to lose faith in me. I'd like to stress that my anxiety had never harmed the quality of my job, nor had I allowed it to impair my capacity to run the company. I'm sure many people in upper management deal with anxiousness without having it affect their work. But my father told me I had disappointed him by making excuses for my weakness and turning to medications. After much deliberation, he concluded that Zach was the ideal choice to take over the company instead of me. He told me I could quit if I wanted, but he didn't trust me to manage the company the way he did. He refused to give me the reins since I had demonstrated that I was not strong. It wasn't only what he said, it was also that he had encouraged me to assume I would be the next CEO, despite the fact that he had made his decision well before the retirement party. It was quite hurtful. That night, I left the celebration early and never spoke with my father again because he had deeply injured me. At the end of the day, it was his company, and he could hire anybody he believed was the greatest fit. If he felt that my nervousness would get in the way, I had to respect his decision. However, I didn't have to put up with that type of rudeness. So I decided to resign, and within a few weeks I began working elsewhere. My mother was the only family member I kept in touch with. When my sister learned that I was retiring because I was furious that my father had appointed Zach as CEO instead of me, she interpreted it as a personal attack. Instead of attempting to understand where I was coming from, she contacted me to defend my father, and we got into a fight. After that, we stopped speaking. I haven't spoken to my father or sister in 2 years, and I haven't had any touch with Zach. I occasionally speak with my mother to see how she's doing. We try to meet at least once a month, and each time we do, she attempts to persuade me to make amends with my father. But I'm simply not interested. My mother contacted me about a week ago, quite frantic. She informed me that Zach had been arrested for fraudulent actions, notably tax fraud. My father was also under scrutiny because of his former affiliation with the corporation. That upset me, but I had no idea what she expected me to do. She wanted me to speak with my father, smooth things out, and testify for him in court if required, because I had previously worked for the company. I was very clear with my mother that I was not going to get engaged in any way. I was confident that if my father was being examined, all of the company's upper management would be scrutinized as well. If Zach had committed fraud, it was a severe allegation, and I did not want to go into the specifics. All I knew was that the farther I got away from this disaster, the better off I would be. So I made it obvious to my mother that I was not going to stick my neck out for my father. They'd have to deal with it on their own because I didn't want any problems. Besides, if my father genuinely wanted my assistance, he should have approached me directly. He's the one who needs me, so why should I be the one to contact him first? My mother then told me that I was being childish and petty, and that I needed to speak with my father and clear the air since the family needed to keep together during this tough time. I felt she was being ridiculous, so I told her my decision was definite. I was not going to reach out to my father at any cost. She became enraged and accused me of being selfish and uncaring because, even though the family was going through a lot, all I cared about was what happened 2 years before. I thought it was very insensitive of her to say so. If she had been in my situation, she would have felt as betrayed as I did, and she would not have been able to move on as soon. She would not have forgiven my father if she had been passed up for a position for which she had worked hard for nearly 7 years due to circumstances beyond her control. It's unreasonable to ask me to forgive him, especially because my father has never even tried to apologize for what he did to me. I don't think anyone can forgive someone who doesn't apologize in the first place. So my mother and I argued for a time. Eventually, I informed her that this was definitely karma for screwing me over, and that whatever was going on with Zach and my father right now, they deserved it. My mother went silent and eventually hung up. I felt horrible for saying that, so I planned to call her back a few hours later. But then I discovered she'd blocked me. I now feel extremely bad about what I said. Am I an asshole for claiming that my father was definitely suffering retribution for passing me over for the CEO position? Update 1. Hello everybody. My mother blocked me 1 week ago, and I still haven't been able to contact her. I'm trying not to feel guilty about it, but there's really not much I can do. She was the only person who kept in touch with me during the last 2 years, and without her, I feel completely lost and alone. Of course, I have my friends to rely on, and they have all been there for me. But my mother was the one person in my family that looked out for me, and I no longer had her. It's difficult coming to terms with this, and I truly want to contact her. However, I still believe that I have done nothing wrong. I don't think I said anything out of line, and I believe this is karma for booting me out of the firm for something I had no influence over. Yes, I have an anxiety issue, but as I previously stated, it is not crushing. It has no bearing on my leadership skills or ability to work as well as everyone else. It did not make me a disappointment, as my father said. Whether people like it or not, words have meaning. What my father told me on the night of his retirement party has stayed with me for the past 2 years. His unsophisticated approach about mental health and its relevance severely harmed my self-esteem for several months. I continued doubting myself and questioning every decision I had made up to that moment. I felt like an imposter in my new work. It took a long time to get over that, and I'm still in treatment dealing with unresolved issues. However, my anxiousness has never impaired my capacity to work. In fact, I am one of the greatest employees at my current job, as my managers often tell me. They're even going to promote me soon. I genuinely believe my father made a significant mistake, and it is not my responsibility if my mother does not recognize this. It just sucks that she's choosing to side with him instead of telling him to fuck up and apologize to me. I don't understand why she believes I should make amends first. One thing is certain, I won't do anything for the family until they apologize for everything. And they must say it with sincerity. I refuse to be used again for selfish gain. Update 2. My sister stopped by to see me today, and it was stressful since she was emotional. She wants me to help her because her husband is in serious jeopardy, but I'm not sure what they expect me to do. My hands are tied here. This is a federal felony, and I don't think I can help them. She appeared to be in a bad situation, so I let her in. I tried to be as kind to her as possible because I am not a heartless person. I can't just slam the door when someone is in so much pain. She started crying on my shoulder, telling me she had no idea what was going on, and that if she had known, she would have stopped it right away. She's quite concerned about what will happen to him, and she wants me to use my connections to help him out. I informed her that, unfortunately, I do not have any such ties that would be relevant here. Then she stated that our father had told us that one of my employers at the company where I presently work is married to a federal judge, and they were hoping I could speak with him and help them. She even suggested that they were willing to pay whatever it needed, but they simply wanted me to put them in touch with my employer and, by extension, his wife. I thought it was rather out of line for her to ask, let alone expect me to do it. I immediately answered no, telling her that I would prefer it if she left me alone. I assumed she had come for emotional support, but this was not something I was going to promote or even discuss. I had several reasons for saying no, the primary one being that I did not want to bring this up with my supervisors and link myself with a family of fraudsters. More significantly, I follow a personal code of morality and ethics. While I don't want anything bad to happen to my sister, if Zach had committed tax fraud, I didn't want to get involved in a situation where I was attempting to aid him or influence the issue in his favor. At this time, it wasn't personal against him. I simply didn't want to become engaged. The most I could give them was emotional support, but for me to go to such lengths was ridiculous. When I said no and asked her to leave, my sister sulked and said she couldn't believe I was still angry at her husband for something that wasn't even his fault. I attempted to clarify that this was not about that. In fact, I had never truly blamed him for what happened to my father. My father decided to give him the position instead of me and allow him to take over the company. If I were in his shoes, I would probably have accepted the post without considering who genuinely deserved it. Maybe I despised him slightly, but I didn't bear a grudge. He just wasn't important enough for that. I tried to inform my sister, but she refused to listen, insisting that our mother had been correct. There was no sense in talking to me because I was still petty and selfish. We ended up fighting again, and I told her to leave my home. She couldn't just walk in and disrespect me after everything had happened, especially after I'd tried to console her, even if she never showed me the same courtesy when I was going through a difficult period. In fact, she argued with me back then because she saw it as a personal attack. She continued to do the same thing 2 years later. So if anyone was acting petty and selfishly, it was my family. Her remark about our mother being correct made me feel bad because, for the past 2 years, my mother had been the only person there for me. Now it felt as if she hadn't been there for me at all, and everything was all for show. I was already deeply offended, and my sister refused to leave. She remained standing there, uttering one nasty thing after another. It soon got to the point where both of us were yelling so loudly at each other that I couldn't hear what she was saying. We ended up yelling at each other before she finally left. I feel terrible about everything that is going on, but at the same time, I believe they deserve what is coming to them. I believe they deserve every negative thing that happens to them. I honestly believe that maintaining in touch with my mother during the last 2 years was a major mistake, and that I should have broken off my entire family when I had the opportunity. Even now, I regret wanting to be there for my sister when she was behaving crazy. They are clearly no longer deserving of my time or attention, as evidenced by their repeated demonstrations. But for some reason, I find it really difficult to completely remove them from my life totally. I keep thinking about our youth, how close we were, and it pains me to talk about it today. All of this is absolutely terrible. I wish it was all over soon. Update 3. It's been 4 days since my sister visited and we got into that argument. No one spoke to me for the following 4 days. I nearly thought they were going to leave me alone now. But today, my parents arrived, and this time I was determined not to let them in. I had already made the mistake of letting my sister in the previous time, and we all know how that went. I wasn't about to repeat my mistake. They were standing outside the door, and I ordered them to leave since I didn't think there was anything more to talk about. They couldn't possibly have anything new to say that hadn't previously been stated, so we could save each other's time and leave it at that. But my father stated he wasn't coming to ask for help. He truly came to apologize. He explained to me that after a long time, he understood he had done the wrong thing. He said that he had made the biggest mistake imaginable and that nothing he said would make it right. But the least he could do was talk to me and apologize for everything. I have to tell you, that actually surprised me since I was expecting him to walk up and start yelling at me or something. We hadn't spoken since the night of his retirement party, and I still remember him calling me a disappointment. I doubt I'll ever forget that. It was all I could think about while he apologized. When he was finished, I told him I was grateful that he had come all the way here to apologize, but it was difficult for me to forgive him. He couldn't just apologize and expect everything to be good, especially after 2 years of no communication and no effort on his part to contact me. I told him I needed time, and even then, I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to forgive him. It wasn't even the fact that he had screwed me over 2 years ago that worried me today, but rather the fact that it took him 2 years and so much hardship to realize he had done the wrong thing and eventually come and talk to me. That's what made me so sad. Even after that, I was expecting him to get angry and start yelling, but he simply stated that he was willing to wait for me to come around. He stated he'd be fine with it even if I never spoke to him again or forgive him. He admits that 2 years ago he made a poor decision. He didn't take my mental health lightly. He simply went too far. He added that in his family, all guys were raised to be rough. They thought that getting through life meant struggling through everything. Anyone who claimed to be anxious or depressed was perceived as weak and making excuses for oneself. When he learned I was using anti-anxiety medication, he began to doubt my ability to lead the company. He had started the business from beginning and couldn't afford to let it fail. His dread and paranoia got the best of him, and he made the worst option possible, which led to our current position. After we stopped talking, he revealed he was angry at me and had resented me for a few months. But then he started second-guessing himself, researching more about anxiety and its mechanisms. A few months ago, he began to suspect that he could be experiencing some symptoms and intended to contact me to resolve the situation. However, the entire episode with Zach came to light, and he was unable to do so. When my father finished describing everything, I felt weird about the scenario. I'm still not sure how I feel about it all, but at least he apologized. It may seem insignificant after 2 years, but it means a great deal to me. I don't know if I'll forgive him anytime soon, and I'm not sure if his apology was real, but I'm prepared to think about it and give it a try. For the time being, I told him to go home and that I would call him if I felt the need. He acknowledged that and departed. My mom and I didn't get to communicate much today. At first, she apologized to me, as did my father. Toward the end of our conversation, she expressed her willingness to wait for my forgiveness. She recognized that she had reacted too fast and rudely, rather than attempting to comprehend what I was going through. She also indicated that she had spoken with my sister, who wanted to repent for previously mistreating me. However, I don't consider that a true apology. My sister is an adult who can speak for herself. If she wants to apologize, she'll have to do so herself. I understand she is struggling with everything Zach related right now, but there is no justification for how she behaved the last time she visited. Anyway, most of my family members have apologized to me and it is now up to me to determine whether or not to accept their apologies. I won't lie, it will be a difficult decision to make. I've gone 2 years without speaking to any of these individuals, with the exception of my mother, and even she's having some difficulties right now. On the one hand, I want to forgive everyone and move on with my life since I don't believe animosity would help me go on. If I don't forgive them, these ideas will continue to haunt me, as they have for the past few years, and I don't want that. On the other hand, I'm not sure if forgiving them and leaving things in the past is the proper thing to do. I'm just perplexed on what to do right now. If I'm honest, I miss my family tremendously, and everything is messing with my mind. I understand that some of you may believe they are only doing this because they are in problems right now, but I've already stated unequivocally that I cannot help them. Even if I could, I wouldn't. It's a matter of principle for me, and I'm not about to change it for anyone. So if they are hoping for my assistance, they have already set themselves up for disappointment. However, if that is not on their thoughts and they are truly attempting to repent and restore our broken connections, it complicates matters even further. I guess I'll sleep on it for a few days and consider what I want to do. I'll keep you all updated. Update 4. Hello everyone, it has been 4 months since I last checked in here. I got incredibly busy in the meantime, which I'll explain later. Anyway, in my last report I said that my dad and sister both apologized to me. My parents did this in person, but my sister, who was preoccupied with Zach's condition, asked my mother to apologize on her behalf. A few weeks later, my sister came to see me in person and apologized. I told her the same thing I told my parents. I'd think about it and let her know. I thought about it. I took my time, and last month I informed them I wanted to restore our friendship, but at my own pace. I said I'd be willing to eat dinner with them once a month and see where it goes because I'm still unsure whether mending our friendship is a good idea. They were ecstatic and stated it was fine as long as I was happy. So that is where we are currently. We ate supper together a few weeks ago. It was embarrassing enough, but I could see they were genuinely attempting to make amends for the past by being especially friendly to me. Zach was not at the dinner because my sister filed for divorce 2 months ago and he had already been dismissed from his job. My father offered to make me the CEO, but I declined. I suppose I need more time. My father is currently handling things at the company, and he is still waiting for a response from me. I will think about it for a few more months and make a decision later, but I may accept. For the time being, I'm simply trying to focus on what I enjoy doing, which includes spending time with my girlfriend. She's an old acquaintance of mine, and we began dating a few months ago. That's what's kept me so busy lately. My life now includes more than just job and family problems. In reality, she was the one who persuaded me to forgive my family and give them another chance. I'm so glad we're together. I had liked her for a long time but had never asked her out since I did not want to jeopardize our friendship. I am delighted she took the first step. Now that we're together, and I'm as happy as I can be, things are looking up for me.